Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 61, recorded January 2022. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we talk with a Star Trek fan. We expose their fandom to the world and try to analyze why we all love this show so much. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 61. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter @TrekProfiles. Warning! All previous Trek content up to and including January 2022 is fair game and may be discussed during this episode. You have been warned, Human. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the generally jejune, jeeringly jocular, yet judiciously jovial M5 Multitronic unit.
The M5 unit is standing by.
M5, what messages do we have?
Communications displayed.
The Trek Profiles Podcast is an independent show. If you'd like to support us, one of the best ways you can do that is to follow us wherever you get your audio. We're on all the major platforms, and your following us helps other Trek fans find us. Another way you can show your support is to make a donation in any amount to our official charity here at the show. That's the Children's Fund for Glycogen Storage Disease. A donation in any amount helps as they are doing some research to cure this terrible genetic condition. I talked about this a lot in episode 34 of the show. So if you're able, and if you'd like, please head on over to trekprofiles.com/donate, and you'll see the link there to give directly to the charity. And I'll also put a link in the show notes too. Thank you so much. There is a bunch of bonus material, outtakes, and random bits from the interview that I cut out and put at the end of the podcast. We actually talked about the bonus material, I think, at one point during the show, and I called it the Trek Profiles Junk Drawer, which I think is a pretty apt description. So anyway, all this stuff will come after the ending audio cards. Enjoy them, or not, as you choose. And by the way, there's a lot of it this time. All right, let's review the Kobayashi Maru lightning round questions from episode 58 with Brandon Shea Mutala. Time for a libation. Will it be a nice Kanar from a top-tier maker or some sketch Romulan ale? Brandon was down for the Kanar, and so were the Twitter tweets by 82 to 18%. But honestly, I bet Kanar is just fermented fish guts, so maybe the joke's on you. I don't know. If you were starring in your own Star Trek show, which of these two would be your nemesis? Captain Braxton or Section 31 Sloan? My guest and the poll respondents were in agreement that Sloan was the guy, in this case by 55 to 45%. Who is your Star Trek Lower Decks bunkmate? Tendi, Boimler, Rutherford, or Mariner? Bichet picked Rutherford, and the cyber-enhanced engineer was also the choice of the Twitter people. He got 47%, LOL, to Tendi at 35, Boimler at 12, and Mariner all the way at the end at 6%. Which place is worse, Galatep or Dominion Internment Camp 371? And once again, my guest and the audience were in agreement that Galatep was the worst. The poll was 79 to 21%. And finally, what's our destination, Captain? Somewhere out there that-a-way, or second star to the right and straight on till morning. And for 5 out of 5, my guest and the listeners agreed that our destination, in this case, was second star to the right by 80 to 20%. Now, if you enjoyed those questions and would like to take a stab at writing your own for possible inclusion in the show, send them to me, feedback at trekprofiles.com, or DM me on Twitter. I also have a post up on my website with more details on exactly what I'm looking for if you want more info. That's it for announcements. Let's get to it. M5, start the show.
M5 will comply.
Her favorite alien is Shran, but she loves the Vulcans and the Kelpians too. She loves the NX-01, but is sorely tempted to like book ship even more. She's from that Get the Cheese to Sickbay subsector, otherwise known as Wisconsin, in Sector 001. It's one half of the First Flight podcast. Welcome, Abby Sommer. Welcome, Abby, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I am honored and overjoyed to be here with you today.
Overjoyed. Wow. Okay. That's sounds like pretty high feelings of joy and happiness. So I feel like we should jump right into it with question 1, which is, are you a Star Trek fan?
Deep down in my core, absolutely yes.
And when did you decide that you were a Star Trek fan as opposed to someone who just watches Star Trek?
Well, when I was little, my house was a sci-fi kind of house. My dad has always been a fan of just kind of sci-fi in general. And we watched a lot of it growing up, and I would catch little bits of it here and there. But it was really when I got into middle school, which was kind of like the early 90s, which was the first golden age of Trek. And I had a best friend, and we just fell into obsession. And by the time I was done with middle school, everybody knew I was a fan. It was just part of who I was, and that's never really changed since.
Very, very cool. So it seems like middle school was the time that you came into full flower as a Trek fan.
Yeah.
And has your fandom like abated? Has it had ebbs and tides and flows, or has it been pretty much like you've been in it the whole time?
There have been times when it's been harder to watch. I mean, growing up in the time before we had streaming services and DVDs and all that, some of Voyager and DS9, especially here in Wisconsin, where there's baseball and basketball and football that people are really in on, they preempted a lot of stuff. So I would miss things. And I was a kid in a TV with a household with one TV. So I was not in charge of the TV for a very long time, but I did learn how to record things and borrow somebody's VCR tape and then tape it to my own VCR tape. These are some old school skills that today's youth will never have. But so I had a hard time being a completionist, but it was always something that was there. It was always something that I loved, that I felt was important to me, that I sought out at every possible opportunity. I was the nerd in high school. We had a ship, the dozen of us. And there's a picture of me. If I can find it, I will send it to you, of my sophomore.
You knew I was going to ask that, right?
Oh, yes, I knew. And I was looking for it, but my high school yearbooks might be in my parents' basement somewhere, which is a cavern of no-goes at the moment. But there's a picture of the 12 of us when I was a sophomore in high school, and we've all got our communicators on, and we're wearing our shirts or our uniforms, and we're, doing the Vulcan salute, and we're in the yearbook as the ship of the school, because I was that kind of nerd. And then, going to college, I was still that kind of nerd. My uniform was my Halloween costume every year. It was just part of who I was. I converted a couple roommates into watching Enterprise that was on then. I actually roomed with someone whose last name was Cutler. So when Crewman Cutler was on that first season, she was like, "It's me in Star Trek." I'm like, "Yes, it is. Let's watch this." So it's just kind of always been like that. And I've always liked finding the little niche things and having a subtle messaging to go out to people. And I've found that, I don't really care. I'm never going to be the cool kid. I'm never going to be the one that, is out there being mispopular, but I am going to love the niche that I fit in. And that has kind of always been where I am.
So as we sit here in early 2022, are you a completionist for all the Star Treks?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And multiple times over on everything. Even the most recent episode of Prodigy that dropped, I've watched 3 times at this point, and I'm sure I will watch more. So, yep, I've seen it all.
Animated series, everything.
Everything. I've even seen the animated series a couple times through. It's not my favorite, but I do go back when I'm doing bigger rewatches, and that's part of it. And there are gems in there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've talked about some of them right here on Trek Profiles. And my comment that I always say whenever the animated series comes up is some of that stuff was just wild to be getting on TV, at the time. I mean, it's just when you go back and look at it, and you're like, I can't believe they actually got this on TV. It's so weird.
Yeah, and geared towards kids. Wow.
Yeah, not so much. They say it was a kid show, and there was some stuff in there that I don't know if I would exactly call kiddie content.
Exactly.
It was. Yeah, it was some of it was pretty subversive, which I thought was great, I thought was just great. So have you been collecting various Star Trek things in your voyage through the fandom as you grew up?
The short answer to that is yes. And the longer answer is not as much as I want to, but I have certain pieces. I don't have tons of cards or tons of books or tons of ships, but I have lots of little things here and there. I have a lot of t-shirts that I've had for a long length of time. I haven't really changed sizes much in the past few decades, which is good because then I can still wear all of my old merchandise that I still have. I have a fleece that I have never seen. I'm sure hundreds of other people have them, but I've never seen another Star Trek one. It's a Starfleet Academy fleece. And I got it at Universal City Walk in 2002, just randomly at a store on the Universal lot. And I was traveling with a friend and we were walking through and I was like, oh my God, that's a Starfleet Academy fleece. I need that. And it's kind of subtle. Like it's gray and it has the letters are green. So you can't really see it first, but it's got the patch on the bottom and everything. I have been rocking that for 2 decades now and I love it. And people who know what it is. Yeah, I will for sure. But, and I mean, I've got other little things. I actually was on a dig in my basement today for some of my old stuff. I've moved a lot and I'm a teacher, so I don't have copious amounts of disposable income. So I don't have tons of stuff, but I have some things that are special. And when I was deep in that obsession that we've talked about in middle school and high school, I mean, I had every book that I could find. I had the Nitpicker's Guides. I'm in the Nitpicker's Guides for DS9, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I'll take a picture of that and send that to you too. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we had a lot of.
What's your biggest DS9 nit? We got to talk about this.
Mine is not a big one, but it was the one I sent in was from the Dias cast, and it's about when Tane is drinking, and they've got those tall kind of champagne-ish looking flutes, and they've got the bubbly liquid, him and Garrick, and pretty much every shot that they take, the liquid goes up, the liquid goes down, the liquid goes up, the liquid goes down, and that was the one I submitted that got me in the book. So, and I've never been the fan that's been like, oh my God, nitpicks, I don't want to. I love those little production things, and like you can see the boom mic, and somebody's wig falls off as they're rolling off screen. I just think it's hilarious. It makes it more grounded almost. And it doesn't break my enjoyment of it at all. And even the ones where you're like, this is a plot hole so big you can run an elephant through it. Yeah, okay. It's fun to think about it and talk about it. And it doesn't detract from my enjoyment at all. But
so you don't see nitpicking as like a negative activity. For you, it's just like, look, behold my astounding powers of observation.
Yeah, that's more of it. Like, and there's spirit behind the nitpicking. Like, I don't want to nitpick just to destroy something. I don't want to destroy the thing I love. But I kind of enjoy the fact that it isn't perfect. And that I can see that because none of us are perfect. So finding all those little things, it's fun for me and it's interesting. And it's, catching the background person waving or, the reflection of somebody in a panel. I think it's fun. And you only catch a lot of that stuff if you're obsessive enough to watch it 500 times like we are. So that's part of it, too. It almost makes you feel like you're in a secret club to be able to see behind the man behind the curtain.
So you mentioned the fact that you're not just out buying every little thing that you see. So what are you using to determine if you want to buy a piece of merch or not? What's the driving force here?
First of all, some of it is money. Like, I love the Eagle Moss ships, but they're not cheap. We're a 2-teacher family with 2 young kids, so disposable income is somewhat limited. Is it something I have space for? Because like I said, I've moved a lot, and not only have I moved myself, but I'm a teacher as my profession. So I've got an entire classroom that moves when I move, and I had a lot of books when I was growing up. Like every new book that came out, I had it. And I had to decrease because carrying that many tubs of books up and down stairs as many times as I have, I just went, as much as I love these, we've got to get rid of some of this stuff. And I've pared down a lot of stuff. So the things that I've kept are the things that really either bring me nostalgia, bring me joy, really mean something special to me. They either came from somebody or I found them with somebody, or it's something really unique. Or like I said, I like the things that are kind of subtle. Like, I'm going to hold this up, not that your audience can see, but I found this.
Soong Cybernetics t-shirt.
Yep, it's a Soong Cybernetics t-shirt that I found way back in like the late 90s, somewhere completely random. And if you don't catch that reference, then it doesn't mean anything to you. But if you do catch the reference, people are like, hey, and that it's just fun that way. And I guess I've gotten a little bit more stuff lately. We've come to a time where with this pandemic, we're not doing anything. So I have a little bit more. I did just get the Borg Advent Cube calendar, which was so fun. But
yeah,
that's
I saw
all
your tweets.
Yeah, that's all little stuff. It's, glasses cases, and the Borg Shadowcaster is really cool. It's got one of those flameless candles that's green and the whole room can light up. That's fun. And I like those little quirky things that, you can have a box of Star Trek stuff that has a lot of stuff in there, but it doesn't take up a huge amount of space, though my house is slowly creeping into Star Trek in every room, despite my husband's protests. And I like the things that are just so weird. Like, do you remember those next gen Pez dispensers that came out? Mm-hmm. They're so strange. They're just so odd. And I've got those because they were so odd that I couldn't not. And it's just kind of stuff like that. It's hard to say because it's not always the same things, but it's the things that I find that I'm like, wow, that's really unique. That's really interesting. That's really different. And it's not always the most blatant thing out there. It's the things that the deep cut fans would get.
That's why when I went to the Star Trek convention, I felt compelled to buy a Spock helmet.
Yep, exactly.
Not because it was on the show, because that wasn't a thing.
Exactly.
But it's just, this is the most like off the wall, irrelevant, weird, kooky sort of thing ever. I must have it.
Yep. Well, and I know, again, your people can't see this, but I'll send a picture. I have the fun little Geordie LaForge mug where he's literally a cylinder. And that's what I'm drinking my chai out of because they're
that is so weird looking.
Isn't it weird?
Send me a picture of that.
Yeah, I totally will.
Because that's a weird looking mug.
Oh, it's really weird, but it's
the way you were
fun.
holding it, I couldn't even tell what it was until you turned it around because it just looked like a striped sort of mug. If you're looking at the back or the side, it just looks like a mug with stripes. You don't know what it is. Yeah. If you're looking at it from the back, it just looks like a cool mug with stripes on it. That's pretty wild. Okay, so what's your favorite item in your collection?
Oh, that's really, really hard. I'm going to take out clothing because a lot of that is, I'm going to take out clothing. It might have to be a tie between my original trade paperback copy of Imzadi by Peter David, which I have loved literally to almost pieces because that one has so much meaning to me. And all right, I'm gonna separate it, and then one thing that was homemade for me and one thing that was like mass produced. I have a friend who in art metals class in high school made me an IDIC bookmark in art metals because she knew I was such a fan, and she was a casual fan. So I have that still for decades, and I use it, and it's beautiful. It's really tarnished now, but it's beautiful, and that means a lot to me because it was made for me. But then I have to say that probably right now my other favorite thing that was mass produced, not specifically for me, is my old school next gen tricorder toy because I get to watch my girls go around and play with it now. And that is a whole nother level of love. And they literally fight over whose turn it is to use the tricorder. And that's awesome.
Now, I got to ask a question here because as we record this, your kids are little.
Yes.
So are you concerned about breakage? Because I would be sweating that every minute.
Yes, they aren't allowed to touch all my stuff. Like all my old action figures, I've got one giant 2-gallon bag of all my old school action figures that they can play. Those things are pretty indestructible. They were already out of the package. I played with them. Some of the board cube stuff, they watched me open everything I got. And I would say, this one you can play with, this one you can't, this one is breakable. The tricorder, honestly, when I played with it when I was younger, I've dropped that thing so many times. Like, it would take something really special to break that one. I'm more concerned that it's going to stop actually working with the batteries and stuff because it's so old and it's got some corrosion. But I also told them, I said, if you break it, I will cry. And they were like, well, we don't want mommy to cry. And I'm like, well, good. Don't break it. So it is something I've thought about. But they get it. They know that everybody has things that are special to them and you have to just be gentle with it. And seeing them use it and enjoy it is worth it. If it gets some more nicks and scratches, it's not perfect out of the box condition anyway. So life goes on.
Have you ever been to a sci-fi or Star Trek convention? And if yes, what was the first one and which one was the most fun?
All right. So yes, not for a while. I'm really looking forward to Mission Chicago, fingers, toes, and anything else you can cross that it goes with all this Omicron. But the very first one I went to I was 14. It was in Milwaukee. It was one of those old creation events. Voyager had just finished its first season. And somehow my 14-year-old self convinced my parents and two of my really good nerdy friends' parents to just drop us off and come back and pick us up at the end of the day, which I'm not sure I'd do as a mom now, but they did. And we had such a blast. And I got to meet Robert Duncan McNeil fresh off of season 1 Voyager. And
nice.
Yeah, I got an autograph. I didn't get a picture, but it was incredible. And it was the first time I could really delve deep into that. And everyone around me was as deep into it. And it cemented that these were my people. And I saved my babysitting money forever. And I spent every penny of it on weird stuff. Like I have an old cassette of Brent Spiner's Old Yellow Eyes Is Back that I got at that convention that I'm afraid to play because I think it's going to disintegrate because it's so old and so played. But yeah, that was just pure joy and made me realize that I needed to do this again. So throughout high school and college, I went to some more here and there when I could. They don't always come to my area of the world, but Chicago would get some, and Chicago's not too far away from where I am. So hit those up with that friend for a while. And then I moved away. I moved to Savannah, Georgia for a while and had my own beginning of adulthood adventure and kind of fell off of going for a while because I just didn't have the money to be able to do it. And I didn't have the time to travel and all that. And then came back, started the next phase of my life where I got married, had kids, and that's kind of put a cramp on stuff. And I've always wanted to go to STLV, but it's the same week as my husband's birthday. And we've got some stuff. We always do an annual camping trip for his birthday. And that's a family tradition for his family. So it's at like the worst possible time of things I really am not going to get out of. So that's why I'm pumped on Mission Chicago to get back into conventions because I've really missed it. And now that I have the time and the money to be able to do it again, I just need the world to be safe enough to let that happen.
Right on. Yeah, I don't know how much of STLV I'm going to go to this year. I mean, it's weird for me because I live in Las Vegas, but it's actually the last weekend in August. So they changed the schedule this year.
That's even worse.
So so a couple of friends of mine who are also school teachers have a problem because they have to work, right? And it's just a very inconvenient week because my kid's in school that week, and so if I wanted to go, I have to deal with carpool because I normally drive carpool. So I would have to work out all of that. It just, I don't know. I mean, I can probably go for pieces and parts of it, but it's not going to be the full on experience. And I'm certainly not going to go stay at the hotel and all that stuff this year. So, but I got the cruise lined up if that goes. So I'll be doing the cruise. So I'll feel like that'll be my Star Trek thing for this year, and then the STLV will be whatever I can do, and it's going to be a little weird because it's at a different hotel this year. So we'll see how that goes. Normally it's at the Rio and the Rio is being redesigned. So it's going to be over at the Bally's. I don't know. It's going to be a little different because one of the nice things about the Rio, which is kind of a dump to be honest, but one of the nice things about it is that it's separate and like you're kind of all there, and you can just go to the convention and never leave the Rio. Yeah. When it's down at Bally's, it's going to be a whole different experience. So we'll see. Maybe I'll have some people on and we can talk about that. So, as a mom of young girls, how did you decide to have the "This is Star Trek," which I love so much, conversation with your kids, and what was the appropriate age for that talk?
Well, it's interesting because my girls right now are 6 and 3, and that, like I said, there's Star Trek stuff all over my house, and they know I wear shirts, and I love the stars, and I like space, and I've got these interesting alien things around. So it's kind of always been there, but it's hard when they're that little to find entry points that are that exciting for today's kids sometimes. Like not that they don't enjoy things that are of that ilk, but it's different. Today's kid TV is very different than it used to be. So thank God for Prodigy, because we had watched a little bit here and there, but nothing really piqued their interest. The short track, The Girl Who Made the Stars, they really enjoyed, and we've watched that a bunch of times. But some Star Trek can be scary or intense or confusing, and like, sure. So I love Prodigy. Watching Prodigy with them has been amazing, and being able to share that with them. And to talk about, look, this is the Federation, and this is what it means, and this is what equality is, and this is what, we talk about diversity, and we talk about being brave, and all of that, and it's been amazing to see them latch onto it and get excited and get into it. And I mean, we have played Prodigy a billion times and I love it. And
which character are you?
Well, I have been told I have to be Captain Janeway because I'm the one who knows the most about Star Trek. And I'm like, that's a huge compliment. I will 1,000,000,000% take that. Thank you very much.
Are you a coffee drinker?
I am not a coffee drinker. That's the one thing. But I'll
but you have to
right.
simulate, right? You have to simulate, right?
I'll do tea.
Have a chai tea.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. But it's just and the characters are kid accessible, and what they're doing to teach them, this is what a phaser is, this is what a tricorder is, this is what a holodeck is. It's perfect. And there are times that I pause and they're like, wait, tell me about this. And what does this mean? And why is this happening? But then we've been able to go back and do some of that. And it's really interesting because now my older daughter is thinking about stuff and getting stuff more. And Paramount Plus is doing these cool little 1 to 1.5 minute short clips with Kate Mulgrew talking about the lesson of each episode. And oh my goodness, my girls refer back to those after we watch them. And I'm like, you're getting it. You're getting it. This is amazing. Yes, we're talking about resilience and, determination. And like this past one that dropped where Dal was in the holodeck and redoing the Kobayashi Maru so many times. Well, my daughter got something from school that was difficult for her and she wanted to give up. And then I was like, hey, and she goes, wait a minute. I'm going to be like Dal. He didn't give up. He tried 100 times. I can do it faster than that. And I almost burst into tears. I'm like, yes, that's the lesson. That's what you're supposed to get. And it's just been wonderful. And for them to share something that they know I love has been wonderful too. After we watch the whole episode as a family on the couch, all cuddled up. And at the end, my older one always hugs me and she goes, I just love this, Mama. And I'm like, yes, me too. And she said something to me the other day about, I'm so glad that Star Trek makes our whole family happy. You the most, but the whole family is happy. And I'm like, yes, it is. And it's been cool. And now she wants to see real Janeway. She's telling me, she's like, I want to see real Janeway on her show. So I'm trying to figure out some episodes that I can get her into where it's Janeway's in character. And when it's not too scary because there's some really good Janeway moments that are way past her tolerance at this point, but she's thinking about it and she's wanting to go into it more. So I'm just looking forward to the next few years when we got to
show her macrocosm.
Yeah, for this time in the world, yeah, we're gonna go and kick that virus's butt for sure.
Outstanding. So you mentioned Mission Chicago, and we're going to assume for this conversation that it goes ahead with minimal disruption. What are you most looking forward to?
The people. And that's what everybody always says. But especially in the past couple of years, I've become a lot more active in the social aspect online of the Trek universe. And I've made some really good friends that I would like to have an opportunity to see and to know and to be in the same place with and just really completely nerd out in that way that Star Trek fans with each other do. And that's going to be fun. And to feel like when you go somewhere like that and you're just surrounded, you're like, the world could be like this. These are the people that make the world better. And it's been kind of hard these past couple of years to have a lot of faith in humanity. You look out there and you're like, man, we as a species are really dumb sometimes. And we do a lot of things that are not in our best interest and are not very kind. And overall, I find Star Trek fans to not be like that. I get hope. I get excitement. I get promise and inclusivity and kindness from the majority of them. I'm not going to say all because there's never anything that doesn't have an exception. But for the most part, it's just good people. And when you can be somewhere for an extended period of time surrounded by good people, it really makes you feel better about the world in general. And I'm kind of excited to get some new stuff, maybe. Stuff.
Do you have your eye on anything in particular?
I don't know. I would like to see if there's any if there's any fan-made Prodigy stuff out there, because let me tell you, as someone who wished that I could have put like Murph under my Christmas tree this year, there isn't one. So if I could, and there's not even stuff on Etsy so much. So I would like to see if maybe there's some people there who've put some stuff out that I can bring back to my girls and really have some fun with there. And I've been doing a little bit more jewelry here and there. Like, I know you can't see because I've got headphones on, but I've got the Vulcan Salute earrings. I got Soji's necklace from Picard, stuff like that. So just some things like that. So hopefully.
Cool. Have you ever worn a cosplay?
I'm not a huge cosplay person because I don't find that my body type fits very well or comfortably in a lot of them. But I did. My mother is a great sewer. And when I was in high school, she made me a TNG era uniform, which has long since fallen apart from overuse and washing and all that. But I did rock that many a Halloween and sometimes just for the fun of it. So, in fact, that costume got me out of a noise violation ticket in college because I was wearing it. So
I think you got to tell me more about that. We're gonna pause right here. I need to know about this.
So there were about 6 of us who were getting together to watch the latest episode of Enterprise at the apartment I was living in, which was college apartment living. These were not soundproof walls. These were not high quality apartments. These were eminently affordable apartments.
Was it these were regular apartments that were rented to college students, or was this a college provided apartment?
It was regular apartments rented to college students, but it was literally built across the back parking lot of the university I went to. So it wasn't official university housing, but it was de facto university housing. When you wanted to live off campus without really living off campus, that was kind of where it was. But we had gotten together to watch the latest episode of Enterprise that had just dropped, and we were all wearing our uniforms or our T-shirts or whatever, and I don't remember what episode it was, but we had turned it up, I guess, too loud, and our upstairs neighbors called the cops on us for who knows why. I didn't think it was that loud, but the knock at the door, I answer it, I'm in full-on uniform, and the cop gives me this look, and he goes, "We got a call for a noise violation?" And I just kind of was like, we're watching Star Trek, and he gives me the whole like head to toe look and goes, "That's a Star Trek uniform, isn't it?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "Can you just turn it down? I'll go tell your neighbors it's not a party." And I was like, "Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Bye." And he left.
Star Trek saves the day.
I know, right? So I don't know if it's because he thought I was just such a nerd that I didn't deserve the ticket, or he was impressed, but whatever it was. And I apologize to my neighbor who I heard nothing from afterwards, but I really think that uniform got me out of what could have been an expensive ticket.
So, Abby, as is the case, the M5 does some gentle, sometimes not so gentle, internet sleuthing prior to every podcast. And I have some things I'm supposed to ask you about, and I don't know what the answers are, where we're going to go with this. So let me just ask the questions, and you tell me what's going on here. I understand you had a particular routine that you would follow when watching Star Trek back in the 90s. So I don't know what this is. Please enlighten me.
Yeah, I wanted as much Star Trek as I could get, and as much info and as much figuring out how things interconnected as I could possibly get. So when I started really getting into things like middle school, high schoolish, and I had a little bit more control over the TV watching, I would sit down and I would have my Star Trek encyclopedia, and I would have the Next Gen Technical Manual, which is what I got to watch most often. It was the least preempted where I grew up. I would have both Nitpicker's guides, and I would have a notebook that I would take notes in about the episode I was watching. And then this is like pre-chat room internet days. So my best friend and I would get on the phone immediately after the ending credits rolled with our notebooks and all of our stuff, and then go through everything together and then take like addendums to our notes. So I have all these old notebooks of when I first watched the episodes, and like, especially with Voyager, because that came on right when we were at the beginning of our high school time. We would have these notebooks and we'd trade them back and forth, and it has all these little scribbles and theories, and it was definitely a routine. And my family knew, and her family knew, if you were on the phone at the end of Star Trek, you were going to get the look. I would literally just stand there and stare at you until you got off the phone because I knew she was waiting. But it was a wonderful routine because you immediately got to fan out with somebody else who got it and had just watched the same thing as you. So it was my routine. And it took a while for me to break myself of having all those reference books and like flipping through and going, okay, so this character was in this one and this one and this one and this one, but not this one. And then did you notice this? And, so goes the obsession.
Right on, right on. For shows that I am really, really into, I usually have like a routine like that. The last one that I was really, really into was the remake of Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to watch each episode 3 times. So the first time I would just watch it straight through.
Yep.
Second time I would watch it with captions.
Yes.
And then I would watch it the third time listening to Ron Moore's, I wouldn't really call it podcast, but I would call it like his audio narrative,
Yep.
his director's commentary that he was releasing in real time as the show went on, and
that's cool.
I don't know if you ever heard those, but it was very like, he's like, okay, I'm drinking scotch, press play. And he would just start talking. I mean, there was no editing. There was no nothing. I mean, he literally just recorded it into an audio recorder and published it, so
fun though.
It was very interesting. Yeah. So we all have those. Okay, I'm also to ask you, and I guess I want to be very delicate about how I ask this, but I suppose there's an indelicate way and a very polite way, and we being a high-class podcast, we'll do it the high-class way. I'm supposed to ask you about your Star Trek wine collection. So what's going on here? Are we some kind of space booze hound, or what's going on?
I really don't drink that much, but pandemic and teacher and young kids, there's definitely the indulgence here or there. But I definitely, when I saw that Star Trek wines were coming out with actual ones, I was like, I don't care. I don't care how much it costs. I am getting this. This is all I want for Christmas or my birthday or both or whatever. And I have gotten all of them that they have released thus far. And I all the way back to when they were doing like here and there little bits, like the Romulan ales that used to come in the bottles. I still have those bottles, and I have a can somewhere, but I think it might have gotten crushed in a move. But I think it's just, it's a way to put two things I enjoy together, and I always use them for some sort of special Star Trek occasion. Like I do the First Flight podcast. So when that launched, we cracked open the Klingon blood wine and shared a glass of that, and in honor of the Klingon that started it all back in Enterprise. And I've got the bottle of Andorian ale, which I have seen that you've tried, that I'm dying for, but I'm waiting for. There's a special episode with Shran coming up that we're going to get to. And then when that drops, that's going to be the night that comes out.
If you can get past the fact that it looks like Scope, it's actually pretty good.
See, I thought Windex, but either way, yes. So I've heard it's really good, but I'm saving it for a special occasion. And I just kind of think it's a fun way to honor Star Trek by having a Star Trek wine while you're doing something Star Trek-y. So hopefully I'm bringing a bottle with me to Chicago if Chicago is a go in April, and saving them for things that mean a lot. And I like the bottles.
Yeah, the bottles are fantastic. I mean, if you haven't read the story about what they had to do to actually recreate that Kanar bottle,
oh my God,
it's amazing.
It's incredible. Yeah. And they knew that it was going to sell because, all us nerds understand all that history that they did and all that prep and all the work. And we're very much impressed by it and thankful. I have to figure out how to put...
the bottles are collectible.
Yeah. I gotta
after you drink the wine, keep the bottle.
Yeah. I want to put something in it that kind of looks like Kanar again, but won't go bad. So I have to... Somebody told me something about dish soap I have to look into. So we'll see.
So... You brought up the First Flight podcast. I want to talk about that, but I really would like to talk about it in a sort of a timeline, sort of narrative, sequential way. When did you decide that you were going to become a podcaster, and specifically a Star Trek podcaster? Take me back in time and tell me what brought that on.
Well, I've been listening to podcasts since forever. Like it's been since podcasts have started being a thing. It's kind of been my thing. Pop in your headphones, listen to stuff, and it's mostly all either Star Trek podcasts or NPR podcasts, because that's kind of where my life leans. And I found Trek Ranks and Weekly Trek, and I was like, oh my God, those are awesome. I would love to be on them. Didn't do a thing about it. Just listened and loved it and put it on my bucket list for someday. And then started interacting a little bit more on like Twitter with people and just kind of got out there, and then happened to make an offhand comment in some really long Twitter thread somewhere that it was on my bucket list to be on Trek Ranks. And suddenly there's Jim Morehouse in my DMs going, "Oh, you've been submitting lists for a while. You want to be on Trek Ranks?" And I went, yes, please. And like danced around like a fool, and then freaked out and went, oh my God, what if I screw it up? And did massive amounts of homework, went on, had a great time. And then because I had talked...
You have to tell us what the topic was the first time you were on.
Oh, buzzer beaters. It was the first one, the top buzzer beaters. And it was really fun and it was really hard because there's a lot of buzzer beaters in Star Trek. So I had a great time. I felt like I did pretty decent. I was super nervous, but it came out pretty well, I think. And I had talked about how I love Enterprise on that show because they always ask, what's your origin story? And I went into the whole history of Enterprise came out right when I was in college, it's the end of college. And as I was going off on my own and taking an adventure, moving away from my family, starting out all this new piece of my life. And it was my show. It was like the touchstone, the thing I always came back to. I really connected with them going out into the unknown and having to figure things out and making mistakes and then going, well, we're not going to do that again, because that's kind of what I was doing in my life right then. And it always resonated with me that Enterprise lives in the gray area. And a lot of people always say, oh, DS9, it's all shades of gray. It is. But they have a lot of foundation to draw from, whereas Enterprise doesn't. And I really enjoy that part of it, the figuring it out and seeing what works and what doesn't, and having those things that become the foundations for what we know later as rules and regulations and directives in Trek. And I really enjoyed seeing those pieces that look like they could have connected from what we have now to where they are then. It's a little bit more, it's easier to see the steps there because it looks more like what it is kind of today. And so I talked about some of that on Trek Ranks. And then all of a sudden, my co-host now, Melanie, reaches out to me and says, hey, I've got this idea for a podcast. I've listened to you on Trek Ranks, and Jim suggested that you would be fantastic. Do you want to do a podcast? And I kind of just went, well, I don't know. Maybe it's a big commitment. And do people actually want to listen to what I say? Like I could babble about Star Trek forever, but that doesn't mean that it's worth anything or worth anybody's time. So we went back and forth and chatted a little bit, and we found out.
Did you know Melanie before this, or just from online, or
just from online here and there? And not too much, but we rapidly became really fast friends, found out we have very similar senses of humor. We've got similar grooves when it comes to Trek. We kind of call ourselves Trek twins, because if we're putting together lists of things, we're pretty much going to match about 70% of the time. And even when we don't, we totally see the other person's point of view. And it was just one of those instant connections. And we decided to just talk a little bit here and there about episodes. And then we started talking format. And then we just kind of did one to see if it would work. And it did. And it was fun. And we both decided, you know what, even if nobody else in the world listens to this, we're enjoying it. And we're having a good time doing it. And we're learning a lot. And Star Trek has always kind of been me time, and now I share it with my kids, which is great. But this kind of thing, like where I'm analyzing and I'm going back and I'm looking for threads and connections and all that, that's when I get to just be me. I don't have to be a mom, I don't have to be a teacher, I can just be Abby, because that's been me since I was little. And that's a really valuable thing to have. And man, the podcast has turned out to be a light in this pandemic time, because we started in the middle of all this. I mean, the world shut down in March 2020, and then it was the next fall that we started talking and doing things, and then we were out a little bit after that. And it's been a lifeline, something that I really look forward to, something that's fun. We've gotten great interaction from people. I've made a bunch of new friends online, and I really think it's about time for Enterprise to have a resurgence, because it's not been the series that people go back to and go, oh, this was amazing and top 10 Trek. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Now, there's a lot of stuff that you go, But you can say that about any of them. I mean, any series has its moments where you just kind of grin and bear it and move on. So I'm really glad to be putting out some Enterprise love out there. And it being the 20th anniversary and not much has really come from official Star Trek, I'm putting it out there. We're celebrating. I mean, I guess technically it's not this year anymore. We're in 2022. But, you know, this is Enterprise's big time. Maybe they're saving it for the quarter century, but we're celebrating now.
Roger that. Roger that. So it seems like the podcast has really connected you in a much bigger way to the broader Trek community. And talk a little bit about that, about connecting with new fans and listeners and how that's influenced your Star Trek fandom.
Well, I don't know that I necessarily have fans. I think people are, that seems
listeners.
Really listeners. Yeah, listeners. And we've got a core group, which has been really fun because we ask for feedback and we do a thing is Porthos pick, where what's your favorite part of the episode? Big, small, in between. We do grappler ratings, like from 1 to 10, what would you rate this episode? Ask people to go back and forth. And that's just been really cool to see things that resonate with people, then little details that you wouldn't have noticed. And to get some of those people who every single time you put something out there, they respond. So it's like a conversation that's completely ongoing. And it feels nice to have connections in this time where people are not really connecting because it's not safe to connect. So it's been really a positive lifeline to have some of that out there. And I think that it's been neat because now that my voice is out there a little bit more, I'm doing more things like this, talking to you and, you know, talking on Weekly Trek and talking on Infinite Diversity. And it's just fun. And I need more little bits of fun in my life. And it's so nice to realize that there are more like-minded people out there. And a lot of Enterprise fans that have been kind of flying under the radar, and they know that talking to Melanie and I would be a safe space. Like, you can love whatever you love in Enterprise, and we're cool with it. I mean, even if you're going back to some of the weird ones and you're like, yeah, I really have a soft spot for that one where Trip gets pregnant, and you're like, all right, good. I'm glad you found some meaning in it, and I'm glad that it brings you joy. Somebody said that, you know, every episode of Star Trek is somebody's favorite and least favorite, and
yeah, that's from Mission Log.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's from Mission Log. You know, and I got to say, I've been live tweeting my viewing of Star Trek for quite a while as I've been doing this grand rewatch. And I get more active and less active as time goes on. It just kind of waxes and wanes. But I got to tell you, one of the things I struggle with, and I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about this, is there are times when I'm watching an episode and I'm just going, I hate this. Like, I hate this episode so much. Like, I want to burn it in a dumpster. You know, it's so bad. And then I feel bad as I'm like typing out tweets, just bagging on it, you know, and I'm like, you know, but it's, you know, I always feel like that's kind of the brand promise. You know, if you're going to follow my live tweeting, I'm going to say what I want to say, but I always feel bad when I hate the episode, which doesn't happen all that much, but it does from time to time. But I'm sure you've had an experience like that. So tell me how that works for you when you're doing a podcast on an episode that you're not a fan of.
Well, we kind of know ahead of time which ones we're dreading, and you suck it up and you go, okay, well, we're going to watch it a couple times. And I always watch at least 3 times before we talk about an episode, because I find that every time I see or notice something different. And it's kind of the same thing that you would do, that you just watch through, and then I watch with captions, and then I watch and I look more at like background, and I'm listening for music and all that. And, you know, I have found that even episodes where I go, man, this one is so boring, or this one really doesn't hold up, or it's really problematic now that we know better than what we were doing good back then, but 20 years is a long time for, you know, social growth. Maybe it would not have been done quite this way. And I've had a couple soapbox rants in there where I say, you know, I love Trek, but this one is difficult. But I've always managed to find something in every episode that is good and worth it and interesting enough to want to share, whether it be somebody's background reaction or the soundtrack to some of the episodes that I really dislike is actually kind of beautiful, or you're noticing costuming. And I'm a big nerd when it comes to watching the costumes in Trek, because I think they don't get nearly enough love in general, all the way back from TOS up until now. I mean, the things they're doing in Discovery this season, blow my mind. They're amazing. So there's always something good to find in there. There's always a good line. There's always a little something that makes you think about it afterwards. But yeah, there are some that are harder than others. And there are some where Melanie and I get all of our nitpicks and ranting out before we start the record, because we don't want anyone to think that we hate an episode, because we don't. We just dislike it with love. Or something like that.
We dislike it with love. That should be a catchphrase on the episode. We dislike it with love. All right. Well, the M5 is suggesting that it's now time to talk about some episodes. Are you game?
I'm ready.
All right. Let's do it. We're going to start with a little bit of TNG. We're going to start with Season 7, Episode 11, Parallels. So this is the one where Worf is coming back from his Batleth tournament where several contestants were maimed. And of course, it has the infamous birthday party scene. So tell me what's going on with this episode and why is it on the list?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I probably have a little bit more love for the wacky Season 7 of TNG than a lot of people do, because it was the first time that I had begged the adults in my household to let me have that uninterrupted hour every single week for the entire season. So I saw them live when they dropped for the first time. I didn't have to go back and forth. And it was, so I think that made it, all those episodes, extra special for me. But that episode, when I first watched it, I was 13, 14. It blew my mind. The idea of all these different realities, and that, you make a choice here, but then in the other reality, you made a different choice, and how it all spirals out, and like the whole branching tree of the multiverse and everything. And I just thought that was the coolest thing I had ever heard. I'd never come across an idea like that in that way. And we see that when, you get 285,000 enterprises popping in by the end of that, and you're seeing all the little differences. It was incredible. And it was one of the first times that I started noticing tiny details of things as the episode was going on. And I felt like I was in on it. Like, oh my goodness, look at that. Data has blue eyes in this one. And this one, they changed the cuffs. In this one, the picture on the wall is different. And it just felt like I was in it. And Worf has never been my favorite character. I don't dislike Worf. I just don't usually vibe with his episodes as much, but I loved this one with him. Like, this is probably my favorite Worf episode, which says a lot because there's a lot of Worf episodes out there. But I like that it shows him that he's got his warrior moments because he won that tournament. And it also shows he's got some humor, he's got heart, he's got the deep emotion. I was never a huge fan of the relationship with Troy, but you know what? In this episode, it worked because it was small little bursts, and you could see that there was other pieces there that had filled in, and you understood why it filled in. And I just think it's such a beautiful episode, and it all ties back up in the end in this nice, neat little bow. So it happened, but it didn't. And I'm a sucker for episodes like that kind of hit a reset button, but the person still knows, because I think then afterwards, Worf is affected by what he'd seen in those other timelines. And you can see it in subtle choices that he makes the rest of the season. And I just think it is high concept sci-fi, well done. I love the little bits of humor. And, you have a true Star Trek fan when you can come up to them and go, oh, your painting's the Battle of Haros, right? And they just laugh. So I don't know. This one, I will watch it every time that I can, because it just is a good hour of TV for me.
Well, then let's change gears for a second and let's talk about some animated Trek. Let's talk about Crisis Point, Lower Decks, Season 1, Episode 9. This is the one where basically we get sucked into Mariner's holodeck movie with Vindicta. So tell me why this episode is special to you.
Well, okay, Lower Decks is just phenomenal. All of Lower Decks is phenomenal. I could rewatch it all the time and laugh every single time and notice things I didn't notice before every single time. But this episode is like getting the best of a Star Trek movie and the best holodeck episode all smushed together into one. And all the little homages here and there are just perfect. Like the title sequences, the really, really, really long flyby of the ship, talking about we have to fight on a rickety bridge, all of those different things. I mean, the two-fisted chop, and there's so many little things in there. And you get Dr. Miglimoo, who I think is hilarious. And I tell people they're acting like a pineapple all the time now because it's just a great line. But besides the fact that you laugh and you recognize and you see all these things, there really is a turning point for Mariner in this one. And it's interesting because I know we've talked about how my husband is much more of a casual Trek fan than I am, but he loves Lower Decks. But he didn't really care for Mariner until this episode. And we had a discussion the first time after he watched it. He's like, I kind of like her now. She's not just obnoxious. I get it more. I see this. And I mean, I think that maybe all of us could benefit, not necessarily by beating up ourselves on a holodeck, but by having a discussion with ourselves that can be that frank and that out there and that eye-opening. And that was a really big moment for her and really kind of a deep realization set amongst all of this silliness that was this movie and this over the top. And she comes out of it and you find that heart. And that is such a good Star Trek moment. And they do it all in like 26 minutes. It's incredible how much story is in that little episode and how many little throwaways. And I love that the part about Tendi talking about not all Orions are like this. And Rutherford just wants to tell Billups how much he admires him. I mean, this is the culmination of season 1 Lower Decks to me. And it's definitely probably in the top 3, if not my very favorite holodeck episode of all Star Trek, because it's just that good. And they do so many little details. Like they change the aspect ratios when you're in the holodeck versus out of the holodeck. It's amazing. And that Da Vinci bit at the end, not on Da Vinci's watch, is just the cherry on the top of the sundae of this episode. It is perfect.
I think you're absolutely right as far as the fact that they have crammed so much into each of these episodes. I mean, I got to tell you, there's more content in one of these than there are in several of the 42-minute episodes of
Absolutely.
Like 90s Trek. In a lot of cases, I got to tell you, because sometimes you watch these episodes and like not much happens, right? But in Lower Decks, like everything is happening so fast. Although I think I may have a different perspective on Mariner. I think that Mariner's terrible. And I think that that's part of the charm of the show is that she's so horrible, right? And that's kind of a thing that happens in TV nowadays is like these sort of anti-hero people. Yeah. And that's kind of the thing. So I feel like it's sort of in that vein where like you're watching this character who's kind of terrible. It has her charms for sure, but is terrible. And that's kind of like, you're like, oh God, don't do the thing. She's doing the thing. Why is she doing that?
Well, and we all know those people in real life too, that you're just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing? You're still doing this? Stop. But somehow they still muddle through and come out okay. So it's interesting to see that reflected in a Star Trek show. And I like that Lower Deck people, they're not the perfect Starfleet officers. And we're seeing more and more of that in modern Trek. And I appreciate that because, I mean, when you think about, if I was in Starfleet, could I really be up there? And I'm just like, I'm kind of a wuss. So I probably couldn't actually be in Starfleet if it was an option because I couldn't do that. But when you see these people who do have flaws and are more like how you are now, I'm like, well, maybe I could do something, but I'm sure not going to be the captain. I don't want that pressure.
Yeah, well, Star Trek, I think, generally speaking, has this sort of conceit that these people are not really people like us. Right. They're not, it's just not realistic. I mean, the example I always bring up is the Voyager episode where they say anybody wants to stay behind on this fantastic planet, and like nobody shows up.
Nobody does. Yeah.
There'd be somebody who'd show up and, some people fight me on it. They're like, no, they're Starfleet, and I'm like, well, you know what? Some of them probably had plans to go do other things in their lives, and not everybody can be Starfleet for life. And I always contrast it with a nice moment in the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, when there's one of the characters, I think it's the Callie character early in the show, she's like one of the deckhands working on the ships. And somebody says something to her. She's like, I just joined the military to get money for dental school. Right? Yeah. And like, that's literally the only reason I'm here. Right. And now she's thrust in the middle of this whole other thing. And so, you got to figure there's people like that in Starfleet too, who are joining for other things, right? Or just to do something for now and maybe want to go do something else later. But it's interesting.
I wonder about Starfleet and work-life balance. As someone who struggles with that in my own life, sometimes, I mean, Star Trek is my escapism, but I look at them sometimes and I'm like, a little bit of holodeck time or shore leave riding a horse on a planet or looking at a beach or something. it's hard because like I'm a teacher, I'm a mom, and both of those things are things that take up a lot of your time and are supposed to be your primary goal and your primary focus. And that's hard to do when you have conflicting things like that. So yes, I do believe that Starfleet people sign up because they believe in it and they want to help and go out and make the universe better. But I agree, there's going to be a bunch of people who are like, well, I have a family and I really want to go and read this book and I'm going to take my vacation. And, I would like time to practice my flute or whatever it is. And you don't see that a lot. And no, granted, that would not be the most exciting TV show to watch everybody, hanging out and, giving themselves a pedicure and taking a bath with a glass of wine and a book or whatever. But I do wonder sometimes about the balance they have there.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. They're not trying to show us like a slice of life kind of thing, like these are the, the Real Housewives of, the 1701D or something, right? It's about the action and what they're trying to do. I get it. But they never really give you the hints of sort of what's going on, right? Yeah. It's really focused on that. So anyway, let's talk about a very different episode. I think you hinted about this one a little bit earlier in one of our other conversations. So let's talk about some Enterprise Season 3, Episode 10, Similitude, in which our Federation characters or our Starfleet characters really become the Vidians, in which we create a new being to harvest its organs. So tell me why this episode is on the list, Abby. What's going on here?
This episode is one of those gray area Enterprise episodes that I just love because there isn't a good choice. No matter what choice you're going to make in here, letting Trip die and not having the engineer you need for this vital mission, or, cloning this thing that's going to be sentient and have a, life and take the pieces. Those are not great options. There really wasn't a third. And I think it was really interesting to see Archer and Phlox have those discussions, and for Phlox to have even suggested it is something that's interesting, because it's not like Archer was like, hey, don't you have one of those cloning things hanging around that we can just make another one? It's a episode that leaves you thinking with every decision, and every step they take along the way, it's another decision that you go, well, I could have. Well, I don't know, because there's not good choices. And the kid who played Young Trip was very much, you could see Connor Trenier. They cast that very, very well. And I'm not. Oh
yeah, the casting was great.
Yeah. Yeah. And like when he's talking about how he remembers his old family and he remembers his Enterprise family and what's going on in that kid's head. And then you see him getting a little older and he's getting more of these memories. And I just think that both the kid and Connor Trenier did bang up jobs acting in this. Like you can see them having this struggle, and you see the people around him struggling with how to interact with him. Like he's not Trip, but he seems like Trip, and they know what his eventual end is going to be. And it's just everything in there is sticky and everything in there is iffy, and it seems like the first step of a slippery slope, and it turns out okay, I guess. I mean, Sim doesn't make it through, which that cold open where you pull away and everybody's there for the funeral and you see what looks like Trip in the coffin, that is one of the top 5 Enterprise cold opens. That's awesome, because you're like, wait, what? No, you can't give me credits now. So it's sad and it's heartwarming and it continues the story and the plot. And I just think it's one of those episodes that every time you watch it, you think differently about it, and you're never right and you're never wrong. And I really appreciate episodes that make me think, and I find more layers in every single time that I watch them.
Yeah, it's an episode that really bothered me, mostly because I was thinking about, I always bring in philosophy to this kind of stuff, and I apply Kantian philosophy to this, which is, would you wish to live in a world where this was the rule, right? Anytime you get sick, you just clone yourself, raise the clone, kill it, and harvest its organs, right? Yep. I think, no, that sounds like a dystopia to me. I don't want that.
Yeah. But go ahead.
No. It's I mean, I guess if you want to take the opposing view, it's the idea that, well, Trip is the only one in the universe who could possibly be engineer on Enterprise, right? Which I find, I'm very skeptical of that. Mostly because the fact is that I I just can't imagine that's how the universe works, right? I mean, the most indispensable people are found in the graveyard. That's where you find the majority of indispensable people in the world, and yet we're all here, right? So I don't know. I get the idea in the show. It really bugged me though, because that's the thing that turns me off to an episode more than anything else, is when there's like something that I find so morally crazy that it just bugs me. I kind of want an aspirational Star Trek. So that's something I struggle with. I don't know if other people have that, but that's just my particular thing.
Well, and I think it's interesting in that episode, too, because you can never separate the fact that Archer and Trip are both coworkers in a command structure, but they're also very good friends. And while that is a benefit most of the time, it's also definitely a downside sometimes, because you have to stay in that command structure and it can cause some friction. So I've always thought in this episode that if it had been somebody else that had this accident and might needed to be cloned, would Archer have still made that choice? Like, had it been, let's say, Travis or Malcolm, would he have made that choice? And I think
or Cutler.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Someone he didn't even know. Really.
Exactly. And how much of it was, yes, he is vital to the mission, and you're not going to like run back to get the engineer from Columbia or whatever because they're way back there and you're hanging out in the Expanse trying to save the planet. But would he have done the same thing if it wasn't his really good buddy too? And that's a whole gray area. And it's interesting to look at and think at, and about all those relationships. And I'm sorry, but when Phlox is a father in this one, it melts me every single time. And then when you see afterwards how he interacts with Trip, it's a little different. Like, he's got a little bit more understanding of the man afterwards. And Phlox is an unsung hero of Enterprise. And this episode is a really good one for him because, he's not human. So he has different thoughts and different resources and different ideas, but it doesn't make him non-moral. And it's just really interesting to see all the layers in this one. And I don't want it to be the norm either by any means, because that's why it's a rock and a hard place kind of choice.
I have discovered in my careful Enterprise rewatch that my favorite characters are the non-humans on board the ship. I really love T'Pol and Phlox, and especially in their scenes together. There has not been a single scene together that I haven't loved.
I agree. And they are kind of the ones who can bring in the alternative perspectives when they do that. And their scenes are not ever, but they're rarely the focal point of an episode. Like, can you think of an episode, more than one or two, that are just T'Pol and Phlox? Probably not. But they're almost every episode, they have some sort of interaction which really brings some gravity or understanding or perspective to the whole episode. And it is absolutely hilarious because Phlox steals her food all the time. Like, if you watch throughout, he'll grab a celery off her plate. He'll grab a piece of a carrot. He'll take a spoonful of this or that. And it's just like one of those things. It's got to have been the actors just making it a running joke. And you don't notice it until you've watched it like 400 times. And you're like, oh, there he goes again, taking her veggies. And that's just sweet.
The one thing that has always jumped out at me in my Enterprise rewatch is all the food. Like, they're eating all the time. And then there was one episode where they were eating, and then it jumps to another scene where they're eating again. And there was like no interruption. It was like they're eating and now they're eating again. And it's like, what just happened? It was like breakfast, now it's lunch.
One of the things that I really enjoy about Enterprise is those meals and those times. Because think about it. When you eat with your friends and family, where do you do the most discussion about your day or what's going on or hashing stuff out? It's at the dinner table. It's at the lunch table. It's at breakfast. It's at a coffee shop. That's when you talk to people, because eating is one of those things that you have to do on a semi-regular basis. And Enterprise is not a huge ship, so there's not places to really go and hang out that aren't other people's quarters. And I just think that that's a nice change from let's do all this exposition and exploration in a turbo lift or while walking down a hallway. It's nice to have them actually sitting, and I think it gives the actors a lot of freedom too, because you can have pauses or you can be doing something that's not just walking and looking. You can break eye contact to get a mouthful, and that means something in the dialogue. So I really enjoy it. And I like watching, because sometimes the food, you look at it and you go, man, I want to eat that. That looks incredible. And sometimes you're like, really? You just gave this visiting delegate an entire whole artichoke? Like, What is he going to do with that? That's so messy. Why would you do that to somebody? That's just mean. He's going to have like artichoke all over him when he's. If you were an alien and someone handed you this, would you know what to do with it? It's an artichoke. It's a little spiky. But it's really fun to watch. And like there was an actual food stylist on Enterprise. Yeah. And I guess she was
Doug Drexler's wife.
Yeah. And I guess her food was so good that sometimes they'd eat it all. And then they would have to do like 10 more takes and they'd be almost sick by the end because they couldn't stop eating it because it was that good. So I like food too. Bring it on.
Well, the one thing I'm absolutely sure of as far as the food stylist goes, or anytime you see food in a scene, and this just isn't in Star Trek, is that food is picked because of how it looks, not because of how it tastes.
Yeah. So if it right? can taste good on top of it, it's a bonus.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk about some more modern Trek. Let's talk about a short Trek, Calypso. Now, the numbering of short Treks is a little weird, but according to Memory Alpha, it's Season 1, Episode 2. This, of course, is the one with Kraft and Zora, and features a lot of references to Funny Face, the film from 1957. So why is this episode, the short Trek, special to you, Abby? Tell me.
All right, so I can be a little cynical in my real life at times, and I am not and I'm not one that I've never been one of those girls who's real into like the romantical stuff, which I know we might get into some of that later, but this is the kind of love story that gets me. And I sat the first time I watched this, and I don't even think I blinked very often. It sucked me in immediately. And when it was done, I just went, oh, it was like my whole body just released. It was a beautiful little short love story. And I love the fact that it doesn't have that much Star Trek in it. I mean, it does. It's got, we've got holograms, we've got sentient AI, as we now know about Zora. We're on Discovery, we've got food replicators and stuff, but it's really about two entities exploring each other and getting to know each other and forming a deep relationship. And it was just done so well. And I appreciate like novellas, essays, short treks, things that are very small but feel complete, because that is hard to do. And it's hard to have something that turns off my cynicism and makes me just go, that was lovely. That was just lovely. And every time I watch it, I get that same feeling that it's just lovely and it's gentle and it's different than normal Trek, but not unrecognizable. And now that we're getting connections to Zora in Discovery, I'm sad that I know Zora is going to be stuck somewhere for a long time without people, because she is a person. She is a life form. She is sentient. And you know that from watching Calypso. You can tell that. And you never see Annabelle Wallis, but you know Zora. And it's just a heartwarming moment. And if I ever have a bad day, I know if I've got 20 minutes, I can watch that and I just feel better. So bravo, Michael Chabon, for writing that. And wow, that is a perfect piece of short fiction.
Let's talk a little bit about some Voyager. Let's talk about a two-parter, Future's End, parts 1 and 2. This, of course, is the time travel episode with Captain Braxton, and we've got the amazing guest stars, Ed Begley Jr. as Henry Starling, and, of course, Sarah Silverman as Rain Robinson. Why is this episode beloved to you, and what's going on here, Abby?
Well, first of all, I have to say that possibly my very favorite thing in this episode is the costuming when they're down on the planet in the 90s. And it is so 90s. And Tuvok wears that little do-rag to cover his ears, which has always in my life been called the two-rag. And we, in fact, refer to bandanas like that as two-rags in my household. But this episode was just great. It's, first of all, I love time travel. So we've got some time travel in there. You've got a mystery. You're putting Trek back in what was the modern time there. You're seeing some parallels to how society is, and they're making some not so veiled comments on how society is. And I like to see some of our characters kind of out of their element and figuring stuff out. And I liked the blend of humor but story in this episode a lot. And all of the guest cast was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you cannot go wrong with who you cast there. And, a bad guy who's a bad guy, but you kind of get it too. Like, you have some sympathy from where he's coming from, how he's doing it, not great, but you will kind of understand why. And then to sit there and go, oh man, maybe the whole computer revolution, maybe this was not supposed to be the way it was. And it's interesting to think things could be happening that we don't even know about and we won't know about for forever. And then I love when you see Braxton come back at the end and he's like, yeah, I don't remember any of that, but thanks. It's another one of those kind of erase buttons. And it's just fun. It's got action, it's got humor, it's got heart, it's got speeches, it's got social commentary. I think for early Voyager, this one really stands out as just a dynamic episode. And you can show this one to people who love Trek and they enjoy it. And you can show it to people who don't really know much about Trek and they enjoy it. And that's the mark of a high quality episode too.
You talked about how you enjoy characters being out of their element. And I think this next episode is a good embodiment of that. Innocence, Voyager, Season 2, Episode 22, Tuvok is trapped on a moon with a group of alien children, which certainly seems like the most un-Tuvok thing imaginable, which is why I think I like this episode, but I'm curious as to why you like it.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, this is one of my favorite episodes that I get a lot of razzing from people. They're like, really, Tuvok and the kids? And I'm like, no, it's Tuvok and the kids. You just didn't say that with the right inflection. Now, granted,
sounds like a band.
Yes, doesn't it though? Someday we'll all get together, everyone who can play instruments, and we'll be Tuvok and the kid. That would be fantastic. But
I'm there.
Yeah. I'll do the tambourine. That's about the extent of my music, but I'm real good at tambourine. But I like this one for a couple reasons. One, when the first time I saw it, I did not see the twist at the end coming at all. I did not see the Drayans aging in reverse. And sorry if I spoiled anyone, but if you're listening to this podcast, I'm pretty sure you've seen the majority of Trek.
Yep, spoilers.
Sorry. Exactly. I didn't see it coming, and I appreciate that because I've read and watched and been in a lot of sci-fi. So to have an ending that I didn't see coming takes a lot. And I appreciate that. And every single time, I appreciate how it is not given away in the episode. I like that. I also have always had an affinity for kids around that age. Like, I work with kids that age. Even when I was younger, I knew by high school that whatever I did in my life, it was going to be with kids. Like, that just kind of is where I naturally go. And I also have always really liked Tuvok as a character. I wish he had been used more on Voyager. I think Tim Russ is a fantastic actor. I think he is a full Vulcan who is very full Vulcan for 95% of the time on Voyager. And that is really interesting. And to see him as a Vulcan parent and what he does with those kids, it's heartwarming and it's Vulcan and it's, again, it just makes you have that little bit of comfort when you see him immediately know how to interact with kids. And you don't see him interacting with kids very often at all. I mean, maybe Naomi Wildman here and there. But when he picks him up, he's like, you stay here and you stay here and you stay here. And the one kid goes, but Tuvok, I want to. And he gives the finger and the look. Like, I sent you a screenshot of that because that look is burned in my brain. And I use it all the time with kids at school.
We'll put that picture up on the show notes page.
Oh, for sure. With kids at school, with my own kids, and it works. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, that is Tuvok as a dad. And that's just such a cool piece of his character that you don't get to explore because his kids aren't there with him. And they're referred to here and there. But the fact that he believes them, because a lot of times adults don't believe kids right away. He believes them. And he goes with it and he's figuring it out and he's protecting them against these people and he's trying to get them up to have asylum and all this. That's amazing. And then at the end, when he figures out that, no, they are supposed to be here and this is really the end of their life naturally, he pivots right away and understands the deep honor of being asked to be there for Tessa's last moments. And that's really meaningful too. And I think because he's Vulcan and they do have that deep understanding of their more spiritual nature, that he was the perfect person for that because he took it seriously and he felt the depth of that ask and how much it meant. And I just really enjoy the episode. And I like that, these people who kind of are xenophobes and don't want to be with other people, and now you find out why, but they were still curious enough to ask. It's a really interesting A and B story, and I think it comes together really well, and there's just not enough Tuvok in Voyager.
Yeah, so I felt like I rediscovered the episode coming back to it in preparation for this because I sort of watched it and sort of forgot about it. And then when I watched it again for this, I thought, yeah, this is really interesting. And I'm really glad that it made the list because I felt like I discovered something that I'd forgotten.
Yeah, and I think now that I'm a parent too, every time I go back and watch it, a lot of episodes hit differently once you have your own kids. And not to say that you can't enjoy them and find them deeply moving, but it's different when you're framing it with your own experience too.
Sure. So, all right, then I want to divert for just a second. And I don't really have a fully formed thesis here, but it's something I've been sort of toying with in my head. So I'm not sure I can articulate it clearly, but I'm going to give it a shot. And I'd love to get your reaction to it. Since we're talking about Voyager, and one of the consistent themes of Trek profiles that comes up a lot on a lot of episodes is something you just brought up, which is that, well, it's been a lot of preface, John, get to it, which is that the episodes change as you have different experiences in your life. And then you go back and you watch an episode that maybe you watched when you were 10, and then when you're 30, you have a completely different reaction to it. And as I go back in Voyager, I think a lot about this recent unpleasantness with the pandemic, and I think about our reaction to the Vidians.
Yeah.
And as I watch Voyager now, especially those earlier seasons, I'm like, we are the Vidians. We are not Starfleet. We are the Vidians. We are nuts, right? We're the crazy people that are dealing with that. And it's totally changed how I kind of interpret some of those earlier episodes. And I don't even know where I'm going with this. So I just want to pause and let you react to that.
The Vidians, when you first watch them, the fact that they look the way they look does not help you get over your initial reaction of, ooh, these must be the bad guys, because most of the time the bad guys in Trek look gross or scary, and they're definitely gross looking. And I mean, they steal somebody's face pretty quick in all this, and that's a rough one.
And Neelix's lung.
Yes, and Neelix's lung for sure. But that one, at least you can't see. You can see the stolen face, so it's creepy. But I think you're right. Like, this whole pandemic has brought out a lot of things where you go, oh man, are we going to make it? Because there's a lot out there that's iffy. And you see desperate people do desperate things and find a way to rationalize it and be okay with it, even if in other times they wouldn't be. And yeah, the Vidians are very interesting. And again, they're not a monoculture. So when you watch the episode Life Signs, you see there's a doctor who is not like all of the other Vidians that we have met. And she's looking for ways to help out and to make things different and to make things better and less adversarial to the people whose organs they want. And later on, she comes back and saves their butt. So, there's a lot to think of there, and no culture, whether it be a fictional one or a real life, real world one, is a monoculture. So there's so many facets there. And yeah, the Vidians are definitely interesting and definitely one of the coolest aliens that we see out in the Delta Quadrant, I think. Very different than anything else.
I would really love to know what actually happens to them at some point. I feel like that's a thread that's just hanging there. I don't know. I thought they were very interesting, and I was kind of much more interested in them than the Kazon and a bunch of the other sort of baddies that we got exposed to. I felt that they were really compelling. And after all this recent stuff we've been dealing with in 2021, 2020, 2021, I feel like we should give the Vidians another look.
Agreed. And you know what? Maybe Prodigy will go back there. I mean, they're hanging out in that area of the galaxy. So
yeah, I want to find out what's going on. So, okay. So we were talking about the idea of families, and I think I want to continue that thread by asking you about Picard's family, especially his weird Dickensian nightmare family that we discover in the movie Generations from 1994, which I will watch again on Tuesday because it's always Tuesday when watching Generations. So here we have Dr. Soren. We've got the Nexus. We've got Picard stuck in the Nexus with Kirk. We've got Death Valley going on. A lot of really weird stuff. So this was something that you said was one of the most meaningful iterations of Star Trek. So I am eagerly awaiting your interpretation of this. Please tell me what's going on, Abby.
All right. So generations. First of all, let's say that, again, I was younger in the 90s. I could not drive. And somehow I managed to convince somebody, my parents, other friends' parents, aunts, uncles, whoever, to get me to the theater to see this movie in the theater 5 times, which is impressive. And it was the first Star Trek movie that I had ever gotten anyone to take me to in a theater. So I think that is part of my nostalgia of this, is that big screen Enterprise for the first time. I'd seen the other movies, but not on a big screen. And that crash on the big screen, I remember just barely breathing the entire time because it was so incredible to watch that. But it really does come back to family. And that is why I consider this could be a Christmas movie. There is a Christmas scene in it. Christmas is about family, right? But, oh yeah, it's definitely a Christmas movie. But this is not just about Picard's actual biological family. It's about his family on the ship. It's about the family of Starfleet. It's about Kirk's family from Starfleet and from his ships. And it's about the relationships. As much as it is an action movie and it's got all of those things in there, it's about the people who are going to come for you, hold you up, have your back, no matter what. And that's family, whether or not it's blood or not. And there are so many moments in this movie where you see that kind of stuff. Like, think about the scene in Stellar Cartography with Picard and Data. And Data's got this emotion chip. It's fused in. He doesn't particularly want it anymore. And the discussion they have about it is a discussion that can only be had by two people who have had enough of a deep, intense relationship to be able to be that honest. I mean, it's kind of a brutal conversation done in a very kind way. And it in the most gorgeous setting, like Stellar Cartography. If I could have a Stellar Cartography in my house, I would just go down there and move the stars around for like hours every day and just watch it because it's cool. But those are the kind of things. Or like when you see that, Data held Troy from flying through the view screen as they crash. When you see, all of them working together, Geordi comes back and everybody's saying, hey, we're so glad you're back. And they don't know he's being spied on. But like all those moments, that's family. And Kirk deciding to come back and save the universe one last time, that's family. And then the music in that one is so underrated. I got the score of that from a friend for Christmas that year, and I must have listened to it 1,000 times. Like every time a music cue comes on when I watch it, I know that music. It's in me now, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And that scene where Picard is burying Kirk up on the top of the rocks, and it spins, and you have that gorgeous music. Every time it brings me to tears because there's our first 2 captains and they had an adventure and it didn't end particularly great for one of them. But the honor and the caring and the feeling for him to have buried him there in those rocks is so moving. I just really like this movie, and it every time makes me feel better about life. And so that's a good Christmas movie, right?
One of the things we were talking about earlier was the idea that as you age and as you have different experiences in your life, it can affect how you look at some of the earlier episodes. And Star Trek can also do that itself, right? So we've had the first season of the Picard show, and so we know sort of what happens to Jean-Luc Picard in that he becomes a simulacrum, right? He becomes this robotic being, a synth. And now we know, if you go back to generations, he's feeling the loss of the family. He felt like, well, his brother was going to actually continue the family with Renee and all that. And so he was off to go gallivanting around the cosmos, to steal a line from Kirk. And now he feels that pressure, right? There's these moments in the movie where he's feeling that pressure. And now we know that that's actually how it ends, right? The Picard family ends with him, and that's the end of it, right? But he's living in that chateau, and what's going to happen to it, right? I mean, is he going to leave it to Maris? Right? We don't even know. that is her name, right? No, Laris. Is he going to leave it to Laris? Yeah. Right? I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be the very last Picard wine, I guess.
Maybe. But I have to say, I'm liking Picard as not a captain in a way I never disliked Picard. I mean, I've always enjoyed him, but I enjoy seeing him as Picard the man, not just, or I guess Picard the synth now, but I enjoy seeing him not in that captain role. I think it is very honest and raw in a way that he wasn't always when he was the captain. And we definitely saw moments of that when it called for it. But I'm liking kind of the grittiness of the Picard that we get in the Picard show. And I know that's a lot of people's flaw with Picard, but I am enjoying seeing him kind of come into his older age and his what he knows is the last act of his life and what he's doing with it, and how he's resigned himself to things that maybe he's relooking at because he's not quite ready to be done.
When you look at the broad Picard arc from TNG, going right back to Encounter at Farpoint, he's very much in this idea, right in the episode when he's talking to Riker in season 1, episode 1, this idea that, I'm the captain and I'm to be up on a pedestal and I don't want to sully myself by dealing with any of the kids on board. Yep. You deal with all of that, and I will be one way on the bridge, and then I'll go into my ready room and facepalm and, do whatever it's sort of in my ready room. And at the end, in All Good Things, you get the idea, he can go and play cards with the crew, right? Which is something that season 1, episode 1 Picard would never do, because that would not be consistent with that mystique of being the captain, right? And then you see the guy outside of that captain's role, and I think that just really set a really good backdrop for the show, and I like that too. And I know a lot of people are going to might be mad at me for this, but I think it was quite appropriate that Clancy just set him straight early on in the show. It's like, dude, you're retired. Just stop, just stop, and he sort of was still in that way. Like, I am Captain Picard. No, you're not. You're a retired guy. This is not your place anymore. And, I know that there are some people that might be in the Picard cult that are angry with me about that, but that's how I felt about it.
No, I agree. And I think it's interesting. And I wish we always want to know what happens next with these characters that we love. But I wish we could see that for even more of these beloved characters. Like, let's go back and see, what is Kira Nerys up to these days? And we know Quark is franchising. We've seen that in other series. So what is he up to? What's going on with Harry Kim? Is he still playing the clarinet? Did he ever find someone to be in love with? Did he ever get promoted? I would love to see some more of these follow-ups. And I wouldn't mind seeing them be more like the modern Trek, where they are more of the real people, because I think it's really resonating.
So let's talk about some Deep Space Nine Season 4, Episode 10, Our Man Bashir. Deep Space Nine basically does James Bond.
Yes.
For which they got into quite a bit of trouble for on the legal front after the episode had gone on the air. There's a whole bunch of stuff about that on Memory Alpha, and there's a whole bunch of other reading you can do on that, and I would encourage people to have an interest to go check that out. But what we really want to talk about here is why you love this episode so much, Abby. Tell me.
This is my comfort food episode that I just kind of go to when I need something after a really long bad day, because the stakes are not that high. Yes, everybody's stuck in the blah 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 blah, but they're not that high. Everything's going to be fine, and this episode is just fun. And I'm not a huge James Bond person. They're fine. I'm kind of neutral. I don't go out of my way. If I see him, I see him. If I don't, I don't. But kind of the whole genre of it. I just loved watching the cast love to do this episode. Like, the joy of them being able to be campy and over the top and in these costumes and in these settings. And they just chewed scenery, and it's fun. And you can put it out. And even the parts when they're not on the holodeck, like Rom, and he's got all of the tubes and the cords everywhere, and there's a spatula, and it's just fun. And you don't have to think that hard. You just have to enjoy it. And this is one of those episodes, if I've had a really lousy day and I just need something that's going to break me out of that deep funk, this is the episode. And the little gif that we have of Cisco now, where he just is looking and then he goes, ha! Is probably one of my favorite top 10 gifs ever, because that face, it's appropriate for many, many, many occasions. And the lines that you can quote in this are just perfect. And that little bit where, he really shoots Garrick in it, and good for him. And Garrick is surprised, and he gets that little bit more respect for Bashir. And there's character building, but it's just fun and well done. And again, the costuming, as someone who always notices the costumes in this episode, even the background people, impeccable, absolutely impeccable. So this one is just because it is joy, and it never fails to make me feel better on a bad day. And that's enough.
There is nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So I want to ask you about a novel. I want to ask you about Peter David's book, Imzadi. Now, we've talked about this book before on Trek Profiles. I had another guest bring it up as something that significantly affected their relationship with Star Trek, and that was Alexander August, one of our earlier episodes. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But I'm curious, for you, Abby, what is it about this book that made it so memorable for you?
All right, so I sent you a picture of this book too, and I would like you to notice the fact that this is a mass market paperback. It is this close to falling apart. I actually bought myself a hardcover as an adult because I almost don't want to read it anymore because it's going to fall apart. And Troy's nose is pretty much completely rubbed off because it was one of those books that had like the bumpy people's faces, and I carried it so many places I've rubbed her nose off. This book, and my friend and I that I obsessed with in middle and high school, we would check out the books from the library. We would take turns buying them when we had enough money and sharing them with each other. We would get the audiobooks on tape from the library and then illegally dub them and listen to them over and over again. And this book just hit every middle school girl thing that I needed. It had science fiction, it had time travel, it had romance, it had the Deanna Troi that I wished that we saw in Next Gen episodes more often. I mean, the character development with her there and all of the stuff on Beta Z, I'm like, God, why don't we have this in the show? Because this is...
Yeah, the Beta Z stuff was great.
Yes, so interesting. And talking about her studies and like the meditative techniques and all that. And you know, when you are that age, you want to find somebody who will love you enough to go back and mess up time just to make sure you're okay. You know, that struck a chord in me. Like, I want that big, great love that would change time. And I always thought it was the very best thing that they figured out it was Data because of a contraction. Like, grammar saves the day. And I enjoy grammar as well. I'm kind of a stickler for it. And, you know, teacher thing again there too, but that was awesome. I'm like, they figured it out because of an apostrophe. And it is eminently rereadable. The characters, even the ones that you have never seen on screen, come to life. It's got a good message, a good heart. It's a fun time travel rant. And you know, there we go. I can't even tell you how many times I read this book. And after a while, it wasn't even the romance. It wasn't the fact that we had this backstory. It was all these pieces and all these timelines coming together. And I have a movie of this book in my head. If they ever could find a way to make it, I know exactly what it looks like in my head because that's how good this was for me. And I still go back.
I would hope that they would tone down super horny Riker at one point because he's super inappropriate horny in this book.
He is, but at the same time, you know, guys that age, and most of them have a little more self-control, but it's not like it's that far under the surface. I mean, I don't think it's that far under the surface for women or any gender at that age. Like that's biology for a lot of it. And I would hope they would tone some of that down. But the fact that he gets moderated by Troy and they come out, both of them better because of how they've interacted with each other, that's great. And like you see bits of that in the actual series of TNG. And I always would look at those moments where, you know, they'd be giving each other a hug or they'd be talking about how they have this deeper connection or, you know, they could be doing this but not because they're on the same ship. I was looking at it through the lens of that book. Like it colored my watching from then on and not in a bad way, in a way that made me know that deeper backstory was there. And I enjoyed it.
I will say, Peter David is just an incredible author.
Yes.
I mean, he's written everything he's written across several different sci-fi franchises, even his independent stuff. It's all fantastic. So
yes,
you're never going to have a bad time.
No, and they're just rereadable. Like sometimes you read, especially genre books, and you're like, well, that was good and it was a nice story, and I'm probably not going to read it again. His you will. You will want to go back, and you'll find things every time in his writing.
So since we're talking about romance or space romance, I have to ask you about Sub Rosa, Season 7, Episode 14 of Next Generation. This is the one with the Scottish space ghosts. And in Gates McFadden's own words, she's in love with a lamp. So tell me what's going on with Sub Rosa. This is the first time I think it's ever come up on Trek Profiles. I didn't look this up, but I don't even want to say too much. Just tell me what's going on, Abby.
Okay, so I knew this was going to come up, and I wanted this to come up because, first of all, I am 100% telling you this is not one of the best episodes of Star Trek. It is
Bite your tongue.
It is meaningful to me. It is not fantastic. Is it campy? Oh my God, yes. Is it silly? Mm-hmm. Is it a really far-fetched story? Absolutely. Are there terrible Scottish accents? They're boundless in this. However, when I watched this one, it was the first time that me in my 14-year-old head, having watched everything else, sat there and went, you know what? Nobody in this episode is upset with Beverly because she's having a sexual relationship. It's not about the sex. Like it's really not. I mean, that's the wonky, goofy part. It's about that they're seeing somebody that they care about do something that they think is not the best choice, and they're finding that line of being supportive of what her choice is because they want her to make her own choices, but also wanting to say, hey, this is kind of a red flag. We're seeing something strange here. Maybe you should not be doing this. And it's the relationships with Beverly and everybody else besides Ronan, the green anaphasic ghost. It's, Picard coming after her and saying, we've had this decades-long thing. Something isn't right. You don't just do this. But at the same time, he's realizing she's grieving. She's having something major happen. We know something is going on, but how can I do this and make it better? It's about Troy checking in on her and trying to make sure that, she's all right and that this isn't something that's going to end up coming back to bite her. I mean, we've all seen people do crazy things after a big loss. And we've all seen people in relationships that we don't think are good for them. And it's a really hard balance of what do you do when you see somebody you care about doing something you think is not healthy, whether it be addiction, whether it be an abusive relationship, whether it be anything like that. How do you, as chosen family, come in and say, let's think about this in another way? And ultimately, just like it is in the episode, that person has to be the one to come to the realization and make the choice. Because you can be as supportive as you want and you can offer help and offer perspective, but until Beverly realizes that this is an anaphasic life form living in a candle and she has to be the one to cut it and be done, it's not going to happen. And I just thought it was a really interesting parallel to the relationship of that found family. And we don't get a lot of Crusher-centered episodes. So to see everybody and their relationships with her, I mean, even Data and Geordi, when they're in the graveyard with Nana, they're still looking out for her. And it was that realization that, in Star Trek, sometimes the sex is played for the body parts, and sometimes it's played for the ratings, and sometimes it's played to get to another part of the story. But it's never just, we're having a problem with this woman having a sexual relationship. So that was nice to see. It's about how do we support our friend and how do we get her out of something that we don't think is good. And that's a fine line. Was it done the best way that it could be? No. Did it mean a lot to me when I was 13, 14 and saw this and saw, as you start to be noticing relationships and relationship dynamics around you and your peers and in adults, it was eye-opening. And I watch it every time, and I still laugh at the Dom Condal because it's silly, and the fog on the bridge is silly. But I really have never forgotten that was like a light bulb going on for me when I watched this episode, that you offer that support and that help, but ultimately it has to be the person in there who stands up and does it. And that's a lesson that I think is really important to hear.
And I think you're right that even though a lot of what's in the episode is sort of preposterous, they do treat Beverly with a modicum of dignity, right? As coworkers and friends. Whereas you compare that to, Enterprise, like where when an episode starts, you can just like literally count the seconds until you see T'Pol in her Vulcan Vicky secret outfit, right? Like in her space pajamas. Like they literally cannot wait to show you that, right? And it's just, come on, guys, really? Just stop. So I appreciate that point of view. I certainly do.
And I have to say, and this is so silly, but as a 13 or 14-year-old, watching both Crusher and Troy in this episode, they have the most beautiful hair they ever have in anything that they have ever put on screen. It is top tier hair. And like, I don't have great hair, and I have always envied those wigs, hair pieces, mix of both, whatever it is. Their hair in this episode is gorgeous. So, and the costuming, like when she decides to become a healer and she goes down and she's got the whole, like the wrap and everything. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Always good things, even in episodes that are kind of so.
Well, we've been talking for quite a while here, Abby. We've talked about your lifelong interest in Star Trek. We've talked about the fact that you've been watching it your whole life. And now, and for people who don't podcast, they don't understand what a massive time sink this is. For every hour of episode that you're actually putting out, there's several hours that actually go into that.
Correct.
Dealing with social media, the editing, the recording times, and, prep work and all that. And that's not a job for us, right? It's a labor of love, right? We're doing. So you're devoting a significant chunk of your time and energy to Star Trek. And so I have to put the question to you, why does Star Trek matter to you? Why is it important?
I knew this question was coming because you ask it all the time. And I've been trying to formulate an answer that kind of encompasses everything that I feel and have a hard time saying. Because is it about hope? Yes, but it's more than that. And I honestly was really thinking about this yesterday, and I found this quote from Michael Okuda, of all people, on Twitter that kind of summed it up and made me think more. So I'm going to credit him for this and read you this little piece and then answer a little bit more of my own. So he says, Star Trek doesn't promise that tomorrow will be a better place. In fact, many Trek stories warn what could happen if we make bad choices. However, Trek says tomorrow can be a better place if we are smart, if we work hard, if we are ethical, and if we celebrate our diversity. And yeah, that's it. Like, I don't think that we're ever going to get to utopia, like ever. And that doesn't mean you stop fighting and pushing and working for it. And I think that's what Star Trek shows me, like hard work, commitment to ethics and morals, making mistakes, but trying to come back from them the best that you can, and constantly pushing for yourself and the world and the universe around you to be a better place. And it makes me think, it makes me happy, it makes me angry sometimes, which is a good thing. It makes me cry, and it's continually giving me more lessons and helping me be that better person who can push for the world to be better. It just feels right for me to have this outlet and to have this whole thing that just resonates with me in lots of different ways. And I'm hoping that if I can give some of that to my own children through either becoming Star Trek fans with me or just because I live the way I live, partly because of the fact that I love what I love, then it's done more than a TV show and a movie series and books and all that could ever have probably hoped to do. It has helped change me, which has helped change the world.
Abby, I have to tell you that the M5 is signaling me that it's now time for the Kobayashi Maru lightning round. The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5 just for you. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our little program. Are you ready to face the Kobayashi Maru, Abby?
As ready as I'm ever going to be.
M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record Abby's responses.
Working. Simulation loaded and ready for use.
Vulcan snack time, Gaspar or Paktar?
Paktar.
Which AI is worse, Control or Nomad?
Oh. Control.
Star Trek cartoon controversy. Who's after you, the Diviner or Vindicta?
The Diviner.
Who's hijacking your starship, Thomas Riker or Cybok?
Thomas Riker.
And finally, just for you, Abby, choose the worst option. Porthos on cheese or T'Pol on the Trillium D?
T'Pol on the Trillium D.
Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing results.
Abby, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has determined that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our little show. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Abby is awarded the title of Educationalist at the Starfleet School on the Lunar 1 colony.
So there you go.
Yay! I love it.
So, Abby, please tell people how they can get in touch with you and how they can learn more about the First Flight podcast, which is your Enterprise rewatch show.
Best place to find me is on Twitter, and I'm at Abby M. Sommer. That's Sommer. And you can find First Flight podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and all of those are at First Flight Pod.
Abby, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
Thank you for having me. This has been joyous.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast, and before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send us your kindly comments, your demented and deranged documents of derision, or selfies of yourself attempting an Orion party dance to feedback@trekprofiles.com, on Facebook or Twitter at Trek Profiles. Anything you send me may be used in the show, or it may be fed to Murph as a snack. This time, I leave you with a quote from the episode Sub Rosa, where Dr. Crusher said, quote, "I did fall asleep reading a particularly erotic chapter in my grandmother's journal," close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
All right, perfect. Well, I see that we're color coordinated, which is very important.
I noticed the same thing.
It's
yes,
critically important, of course. You know, the podcast would not be nearly as good if we weren't wearing the same color. So
well,
that
we must be on
out.
the same laundry cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm only like 75 minutes from Chicago, where I know you were recently. So sometime if you're back here and have some lead time in Chicago, we'll either meet halfway or I'll come down when the world isn't falling apart.
Why was I in Chicago? I might have just been going through the I was going through the airport. That's all that was. Yeah, I just had a connection through Midway. So that's all that was. I didn't actually leave the airport. I just had like a 4 or 5 hour hangout at Midway, and I had some very disappointing pizza.
Midway's not the airport you want to get stuck in.
I wasn't getting stuck. I wasn't stuck. It was how my company booked the flight. What can you do? What can you do, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I do have to go to Chicago for work sometimes. Right there in the city itself, right in the middle of downtown. So whenever work travel is cut way back these days, but especially in the before times, I used to go meet Star Trek fans, and I used to put stuff out on Twitter, and I was like, hey, if there's any people here, let's go hang out. So I miss that, actually.
Yeah. I miss people in general, and I'm desperately afraid for April and the con in Chicago, because that was the first one that I might be able to actually go to in a really, really long time because of kids and money and location and time in the year and everything. And it's real iffy.
So let me jump into my news and weather here and give you sort of my overview of what's going to happen, and then we'll jump into it. Sound good?
Sound good. I've listened to all these, so I kind of have an idea of how we're going to go.
I'm very sorry if you've listened to, no one should listen to these.
No, they're amazing. They really are. And I know we're all self-deprecating when it comes to what we put out there, but one of the things I love about the Trek fandom is how we all find our own way to put our love out there. And this is so different and unique, and it's finding everybody else is different and unique. And it's so much fun. Now, I can't tell you that I sit down and listen all in one fell swoop most of the time because they're long.
No one should.
But I do listen to all of them, even your giant extravaganza ones. And it feels like I make friends.
10 hours of podcasting. No one should listen to that.
Oh, no, it was fun. It was fun. You keep me company when I'm exercising a lot. And I feel like I know people more because of it. And that's wonderful. So I am excited to be here and excited to do this. And it's going to be wonderful. And everybody should listen.
All right. Well, geez, I might put that in the outtake, but I'd have to fight my my superpower, which is self-deprecation, and sort of this humble pie thing I got going on, which is very well earned, I should add. So okay, then I'm going to ask you for a piece of feedback, which I got from somebody else who listens,
okay.
and I won't say who they are, but this other person said to me, "I'm not really interested in an episode unless I know the person who's on. Like, if it's a stranger to me, I'm not interested." And I was like, really? Are you sure? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. What do you think of this?
All right. So when I discovered you already had a bit of a back catalog. So I have to say that I went back and listened to the names that I recognized first. But then I went back and listened to all the rest of them too and discovered some new people that I then went and sought out and got to know better. And I'm excited whenever it comes out because you've never found anybody who's boring, because I don't really think anybody is boring, and especially not Star Trek fans. And I like when there are people on who I'm like, wow, I really don't agree with anything this person says, but I bet you we could still hang out. And that's a really cool thing. And one of the things that I like about Trek is finding people who you don't like Star Trek if you're a closed-minded jerk most of the time. So that's a good thing. And I like the mix that you've been doing. I like the newbies you've been doing. That's really interesting.
Aren't some of those people wild?
Yes. And such a different perspective because I'm sure we're going to talk about Sub Rosa, but someone watching Sub Rosa now in 2022 for the first time versus me watching it back when it first aired, totally different thing. And going back, yeah. So it's just a very interesting mix of people. So no, keep it all mixed up and everybody all over. And do I squeal when it's people I know? Well, yeah, it's because the people I know are awesome and I want them to be featured on things that are awesome. But I also love every episode and I like the people who I get to know. So keep it up. You're fine.
All right. Sounds
That's
good.
My soapbox.
There's people that I pursue, like the newbies are all people that I sought out. The
right.
newbies wouldn't know to come and search for a show like mine to be on. Those are all people that I, volunteered. they go on Reddit in the Star Trek, or they go on a Star Trek forum somewhere and they come out and be like, I thought Star Trek was stupid and now I love it. And now I have to watch 800 hours. Pity me. And I'm like, hey friend. Hey, friendo. Want to talk some Trek with a weirdo from online? And then I con them into saying yes. And it's some of the weirdest episodes I think I've done is with those people.
But it's so interesting. It's so interesting. Such a different perspective.
And one of my favorite things is they don't know all the other stuff that floats around the fandom. These old sort of things that we sort of bandy about, and the things you're supposed to like and the things you're supposed to hate and the things you're supposed to agree with everybody on. They don't have any of that. Yeah. And so I love those perspectives. And, sometimes I think some listeners might be like, oh, you had that person on, they're terrible, or they're not the exact right kind of fan, or in some way, because they don't like the thing that I like and with exactly as much intensity and for the correct reasons that I like. I'm like, dude, you know what? I feel that there's a lot of diversity in the fandom and I'm all for that. So I don't mind having on lots of different kinds of people. And I know that some people, I have had people that have listened to the show who tell me, oh, I was listening to that episode. I had to turn it off after 5 minutes. Because once that person started talking, I was like, they're not my kind of person, my kind of Star Trek fan, And I was like, that's on you, bro.
Yeah, exactly. You're missing out. Sorry.
This show is a smorgasbord, right? Mm-hmm. Think of Commander Hutch. Right. This is the smorgasbord of foods that he's laid out. Right. And we're going to have the small talk. And if that's not your thing, that's not your thing. All right. Let me put this down here. I appreciate that you got that joke, by the way.
Oh, yes.
So is your husband a Trek fan or no? Or does he just tolerate this stuff?
No, he's kind of middling. Like, he watched on and off when he was younger, wasn't ever like obsessed, didn't like or dislike it. When we started going out, I made him watch all of Enterprise and all of Voyager and all of DS9 with me. And then we never got all the way through TNG because he'd seen most of it. And now he watches all the new stuff with me as it drops. And like he says, Lower Decks is his thing. He watched it without me sitting next to him. He thinks it's hilarious, even though he doesn't get, he's like, I get like a quarter of what you're laughing at, or something will happen and you'll snort and I'll be like, that wasn't funny. I'm like, but you still love it enough to rewatch it, like when you're on the treadmill without me there. So, and I feel kind of the same way. He's more a Star Wars person, and I'll watch the stuff with him and it's fine and I like it and I can chat it, but I'm not like collecting stuff and obsessing like he is. So we're a blended family.
Let me just pause and just say, I do not, and I literally do not understand this Star Trek versus Star Wars thing.
No.
It's like literally like transmission repair and beauty queens. You know, they have nothing to do with each other. Like,
right.
There is no binary choice. There is no scale on which you have to choose one or the other. It's bizarre to me that people often say things like that. Well, we're a Star Wars people. Like, so what? You know, you can be all the things. You can be none of the things. You can like this one. You can like that one. You can like whatever. I don't get it at all. That's just my own personal. Put the chapstick on, which is my most important thing.
You know what? I should do that too. I love that we both have a chapstick handy.
You know, chapstick, hilariously, chapstick is actually one of those things that I bring up, like, you know, whenever you're at like a social event or like a cocktail party, when we used to have those, or like at a work thing, you know, and you're going around Zoom and they're like, tell me something, you know, interesting, tell me something about yourself, you know, and whenever I want to say like the most irrelevant thing possible, I'll say something like, you know, I have this annoying habit that I'm usually working on 11 chapsticks at one time. Like, I have one at this desk. The desk behind me is my work desk, so that you can see right behind me. I have another chapstick over there. I have one here. Then I have one on the other side of the monitor, and that's where I keep my keys and stuff. So when I'm out on the road, I have one there. I have one in my work bag. I have one in my desk at work. I have one upstairs on the bathroom. I have one downstairs in the kitchen island in case I'm there. So like I am never like more than 5 feet from a chapstick, and I usually have like a bunch of them going at one time.
Yeah, well,
and they're all different flavors.
Oh, see, I actually like Carmex better than chapstick because I feel like in the winter, especially here in Wisconsin, it really helps. And their cherry is my favorite. The only thing I've ever bought on Amazon Prime Day is a 24-pack of cherry Carmex. Always in my pocket. There's always one in my purse. There's always one, like I wear pajamas like sweats with pockets. There's always one in there because I'm not wearing my real pants. There's one down in our kitchen. I totally understand. So we are like minds.
This is the spearmint, and the spearmint is always the one that's at my work desk, and the cherry is what I take with me. And back over here, I have the traditional black and white standard flavor, you know. So like I'm very down with the chapstick discourse, you know. So yeah, we can totally do that. Some room noise though, because that always changes. So we'll do a little bit of room noise, and then I'll jump into my next question, unless you have any other stuff you want to ask about.
I just want to say we're both wearing blue Star Trek shirts today again. You know, ships.
That's right. Well, this is Lower Decks. This is the Lower Deck shirt. Did you sign up for these?
I didn't get all of them, no, because I couldn't afford it. And some of them, like, I don't look good pale person in yellows and oranges. So, like, what am I going to do with a yellow and orange shirt that I'm probably never going to wear? So I just got the ones that I liked. But this is the one my husband got me for Christmas. It's like all the ships, and it's got hearts. It's a big heart, and it says Star Trek at the bottom. So
nice. Yeah, very good. Very good.
It sounds like my 6-year-old when she does something wrong. Worst day ever. Everything is ruined. My life is over.
I know, everything sucks.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
I get that, right? So I always feel that Star Trek is more aspirational than like a roadmap. But there's some people who feel differently, you know, and that's okay. But it's definitely not been me. So I get exactly what you're saying when you're in that quote. So that really landed for me. So I really like that.
I couldn't believe I was out there just trying to formulate how I was going to say this answer. And then he popped up with that. I'm like, oh, my God, Mike Okuda, if I didn't love you already, I love you right now. That was perfect.
Right? I know. It's yeah. So, you know, I always feel bad because like Porthos, you know, he's just a cute little dog, you know, but like DePaul, she's a grown up, you know, making bad choices.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
She has more potential to do harm.
Right on. Right. Well, I don't know, man. Sometimes, little dog.
That's true.
Sometimes I wonder, like, who's cleaning up after him? Is there some, I know that there's, like, some low-level room steward that has to go clean up after him, and I always feel bad for that guy.
I imagine there's, like, a space Roomba for dogs that it just kind of follows behind them and picks it up or disintegrates it or beams it to somewhere else or something.
No, they turn it into food.
Yeah, that's true. It becomes your apple.
Right? No, it's right. It's rated Enterprise, right? Trip is like a poop question, sir.
I know.
Right? Remember that?
So
they turn
funny.
it into boots.
Yep. So
I wonder if that's like specifically Archer is like, I would like my uniform to be made out of Porthos's droppings.
Ooh, that's getting close to your pet in a whole different way.
Oh my God! Oh, good God! All right, why'd you pick the Diviner over Vindicta?
Well, I think there's a lot more to the Diviner than we know right now. And while I think he seems to be pure villain, I think that there's going to be more layers that we find out there. And Vindicta, as fun as she may be, there is not an ounce of rational in her. So I think it would just be more interesting because I would like to find out what's up with the Diviner. But I would also like a Return of Vindicta movie some point. So, maybe that answer will change down the line.
All right, we're going to put Abby down for more Vindicta at some point in the future, right?
Yes, please.
Was it everything you'd hoped?
Honestly, yeah, it was. Like, this has been so fun, and it's just nice to talk to you and to get to really nerd out on some of my things. And yeah, this was fun, and it sent me into my basement in some boxes I haven't looked at in a while, so that was also fun.
Right, we did a little trip down Star Trek memory lane, right? The one thing I always hate when I'm interviewing a guest, they're like, "Oh, I have this great collectible, but it's in a box in a storage unit somewhere, and I don't know where it is." And I'm like, "Come on, man! You got to send me a picture of that." I always get so upset about that. Though, you brought up something that made me remember something, which is I had this really weird habit, which is dying now because of which will be apparent as to why, that I used to keep all my movie stubs.
Oh, yeah.
So I have them going back to the early 90s.
Nice.
And so I have like Star Trek Generations,
and
I can tell you like what movie theater I saw it in and all that.
What dates?
Yeah. And like what movie theater and like who the ticket taker was is on there for some reason. I don't know why that is on there, but it's like, Katie sold me a ticket to go see Generations. The very first movie though in there that I have, the earliest one, it's so embarrassingly bad. Blank Man.
I don't know.
Which is a movie that only made $8 because I saw it. So yeah, it's so bad. It's so bad. But I got all these other ones in there. So it's kind of like a little walk down memory lane.
Yeah.
But now it's all like contactless tickets.
Yeah.
So there's no stubs, which is kind of bugging me,
It is a bummer because, I was looking back through my stuff and I found all my stubs, and I've got the one that's like, here's all the Lord of the Rings ones, here's all the Star Trek ones, here's all the Star Wars ones, here's all the X-Men ones, like all the nerd stubs there.
Oh my God, yeah. You know what? And it's really bugging me because I just saw Dune on streaming, and I did see it in the movie theater. I saw it on IMAX, which was absolutely essential in my opinion.
We saw it in like an ultra something or another screen when we thought it might be safe to go to the movies. That's not happening again for a while, but yeah, it was you had to see that in the theater. Oh my God, that's a 3D sound movie right there.
Oh yeah, you want to hear like just the starter car, throat singing, and get rocked out of your seats. Have you read the books?
Yes. Well, most of them. I think I stopped. There's like 20 some. I think I stopped at like 13 or 14 because I was like, this.
No. This is a very sensitive issue you're bringing up.
Okay,
Abby.
sorry.
There are only 6 books.
Oh, okay. Well,
all right. There's the original Frank Herbert books,
yes,
of which there are only 6.
Yes.
Okay.
Those I have read.
So there's Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, and then Chapter House Dune. That's it. The other books are all written by his son.
His son, yeah.
And another guy. And they're just not the same in my opinion.
No. That's why I stopped with some of those. Yeah.
But there's like this really weird thing that happens after God Emperor of Dune where it like takes a big time jump. And it's the last 2 books are really all about the Bene Gesserit, and it's like I hate the Bene Gesserit, so I'm like I'm just not into this. I mean, I read the books years ago, and I'm rereading them now, and I'm halfway through Heretics, and it's like it's a slog. It is absolutely a slog. I love God Emperor though. That's one of my favorites. But I just love how perverse the books are.
Yes.
You know.
Oh yes.
In that, like, I was trying to describe it to someone the other day, and I was like, okay, imagine watching the entire Lord of the Rings franchise. Like the first 3 films, like ending with Return of the King, and like that's the Dune book. That like here's this guy who's hard done by, and he basically, everything gets set to right, and then the next book is like, oh, that was a mistake. Oh God, that never should have. That guy's terrible. Like, no, dude, Aragorn is bad. And like he must be stopped. And with the whole thing was a disaster. Please stop. And I just love that whole inversion that takes place. And I think, Frank Herbert, you're a mad lad for writing this. Because the books are continuous, but they're like it's almost like they're a completely different genre. You get into the second book and it's a very different story. It's the same story with the same characters, but it's a very different style. And I really like that.
I agree. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do especially now that they had to keep pushing this first half of the first one back, and it did all right. Like, I really hope they're making more of them and they're going to keep going for a while, because it'd be interesting to see how they did
announce the second one is greenlit.
Is it? Oh, good.
Yeah.
Because when I had gone to see it, they said maybe. Good.
Yeah, because for those who don't know, if anyone's listening to this, the Dune movie is only the first half of the first book. Or maybe 60% of the first book. So there's a lot to go. But there is no way that they could actually film the rest of those books. Like, God Emperor of Dune is literally this other character who's having conversations with basically his assistant, and that's it. It's like and he's like, basically it's the God Emperor Leto II talking to Mineo and going, Mineo, are you even listening to me? Yes, Lord. That's basically the book, and I couldn't put it down. Yeah, but it's basically the Duke Leto yelling at or Emperor Leto yelling at this guy, like the entire book. I'm being vastly reductive, and there's people out there who are big fans of the book who are going to yell at me, but it's not too far off the path. Yeah,
it would make quite a movie. It would either be really interesting or really not.
Well, haven't you ever seen the classic film with Wallace Shawn?
Oh, yes.
My Dinner with Andre.
Yes. Right? Yeah, I can see that.
It's literally 2 guys having dinner in a fancy restaurant. Yeah. That's the whole movie. Yep. I didn't leave anything out, right? That's it. That's all that happens. and that's it, and it's compelling, right?
It is.
It's because of the actors, right? And because of just that, but it's not like, and then what happens, it's like they talk more.
Exactly.
So
awesome. Yeah, it's going to be some editing. We've got some interesting things, tangents in here, but I always like the outtakes at the end. I always think it's really fun. Like, you get to know.
Do you listen to those?
I do. Yeah, I do.
Okay. I always wonder, I'm like, does anyone really care about this stuff? I don't know. I'm always sort of ambivalent about it, so.
Well, okay. So I have to tell you, when they talk about people in media, and there are some people who jump to whatever the next shiny thing is. There's some people who find their one thing and stick to it. There are some people that are like, they call them the bitter enders. They're going to listen and watch everything, even if they realize the thing they once loved has no longer awesome. I'm kind of a bitter ender. I'm going to keep watching or reading or whatever until. But I don't mind it with your outtakes. Like, I think they're interesting, and I think you get some of those tangents, which obviously makes the person, and there's obviously conversation going on, which is interesting. And I think it's good. I appreciate that you put it in a different place, because I'm sure it helps the flow of everything so much better. But I like those bits too. Those are the bits that are really the personality sometimes.
Oh yeah, sometimes I feel like it's almost like the best bits and the worst bits all at the same time kind of end up back there. Yeah. So in my head, I think of it like the Trek Profiles junk drawer. Yeah. Like open it up and, God knows what you're going to find in there. It's like a bag of rubber bands, or, here's this battery for I don't know what,
the dead
this really
battery.
Weird shape.
Yep.
Or like some really weird food implement, food thing, and you don't know what it's for. You got to go look it up online. So.
And a pen with no cap that doesn't work. Always, there's a pen with no cap that doesn't work.
Oh my God, so many pens.
Yeah,
so many pens, right? And we were just on a trip, my wife and I, and we realized in the middle of the trip that like we forgot to bring pens. Like, how do you forget to bring a pen? So I had to go to Office Depot to buy pens. It's just so weird. So weird.
That's funny because like my purse, I swear it eats pens and then spontaneously generates them because every time I clean out my purse, which is like a couple times a year, there's like 12 pens in there. I'm like, where did these come from? No wonder my purse is so heavy. I have an entire pack of pens in here.
So I always love to have, I have a particular personality quirk that my wife graciously deals with, which is that I hate to carry anything. I want to carry no things, right? I don't like to have a lot of stuff in my pockets. I don't like to, but the one exception is I'll wear a backpack with as much stuff as you can cram in there, right?
Okay.
So I have a really huge backpack with like 17 compartments and like 14 places to attach things. And I have one of those for a social organization that I'm in. So every time I go to a meeting, I just grab that backpack, has all my stuff. I have one for flying. I don't know if I talk about, I fly planes, right? So I have like an aviation headset. I got an iPad. I got a knee board and, there's all kinds of accoutrements and, just all kinds of, it's actually sitting right here. And I have a water bottle and I got, all kinds of things crammed in that backpack. So I just grab it and go, right? So I had one that I was always bring on trips. So whenever we're going anywhere, I have this backpack. My wife can put her stuff in there. My kid can put her stuff in there. It's fine. But don't ask me to carry anything in my hands because I'm not doing it. Put it in the backpack. And so she just got me a new one for Christmas. And so I didn't think to stock it with pens, and that's why. So we go on the trip, and I'm like, oh, they'd be in the little net mesh part in my backpack of many compartments, and I open up and there's no pens. I was like, wow, catastrophe! Just like literally these small things that just totally send my life sideways, right? There's not a pen where I expect it to be. It's like a catastrophe that has to be solved immediately, right? So.
Well, if it makes
that was probably the far less interesting story than I had promised. I'm sorry.
If it makes you feel any better, I feel the same way about pens because being an elementary school teacher, I can always find a pencil. I can't always find a pen or a pen that works. So I found these pens that I can hook onto my lanyard that I have to wear with my ID on it. They're light. They don't mess up my clothes. They don't make marks or leave anything. And I constantly am wearing a pen for when I need it. And I can't tell you how many times in my not at school life, I reach like this to try to grab my pen that isn't there because I'm not wearing my lanyard. So I feel that deeply.
What grade do you teach?
I'm a reading specialist, so I do kindergarten through 5th grade small group reading interventions for kids who don't need special ed services but need that boost in literacy. It's really fun.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I really like it because I get to know families and kids for like longer chunks because their supplement. So like I could have a kid for 6 years, 45 minutes a day, and you really can hit the ground running when you get them back in. The families know you, they trust you, they understand you're there for your kid. And it's really fun. Like I've been a massive reader since I can't even remember not knowing how to read. And it's always just been my thing. And to be able to give that to people is really, it's a privilege that you send your kids to school and trust teachers to give them what they're going to need for their life. Like that's a big privilege and a big responsibility. And I don't take it lightly. And I love doing it. And you just look at these kids and you just want them to learn and be successful and be healthy and happy and come through this. There's been a lot of bad stuff that's been happening with kids in all this. And my heart just breaks. So
one of the things that I heard was a prediction from somebody who's an observer really of the educational system. And they said that one of the things you're likely to see in the short term, continuing to the medium term, is a move away from any testing, like to stop doing any kind of testing because the numbers are going to be so horrendous that no one's going to want to talk about it. Like just looking at like the trend lines and where things are. Like over this whole COVID thing, that the kids are doing so poorly that like it'll be a scandal. So they're going to be like, let's not do the testing this year.
But testing companies make a crap ton of money. And they give money back sometimes if you use their test. And one of the things, I hope that happens with every fiber of my being, because you know who sets where kids are supposed to be at certain ages? We do. If we know we just went through this giant global trauma, well, we could say, well, you know what? Yeah, we would like you to be here. But since we had all this, how about we just get here? Like, we're not lowering the bar to not want them to learn. We're just making it something that's possible and changing it to be what's more appropriate for where they are now. That should always be what you do. Meet the kids where they are and grow them. Like,
oh my God.
Hello.
Speaking of appropriate, right? One of the things I did, I'm kind of in charge of the educational stuff for Whopper Jr., right? So I often read the books that he's reading and we talk about them, you know, for school. And some of these books, I'm just like, wow, man. I was like, we you know, in sixth grade, he got The Giver.
Yeah.
So he had to read that one. And I was like, this is a lot for sixth graders. You know, he got that one. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was another one. And I was reading, I thought that book was amazing.
Yes,
I really
that book
liked
is
it.
fantastic.
But I was like, man, for like a sixth grader, I was like, I don't know, man.
But you know, when you start giving them that, then they start getting those ideas in there, and then they formulate and percolate and make the connections out to the bigger world. So even if we see it, and one of the things I always tell people is, remember, you're seeing it as someone who's read and experienced media, books, TV, all this so many more times. So the things that they're seeing, a lot of it, they're getting that for the first time. And that's why it's so big to them. And they need those experiences from multiple places in order to kind of synthesize their feelings on it. But yeah, those are some heavy books. The Giver is actually a trilogy. If you ever want to go look, the rest of it is really good. Yeah. Like the first one is good. The second one feels like the middle of the story, but then the third one is really, really good.
I mean, it seems it ends on kind of a mysterious note, like with him going on that bike down the hill, if I remember it right, you know, and you're like, what actually happens at that point? So, hey, I wanted to give you a recommendation though.
Yeah.
I do you have an iPhone or an Android phone?
I have an iPhone.
Okay. If you really like stellar cartography, you should check out an app called Sky Guide. Do you have that?
No, but I'm writing it down now in my little Post-it.
It's so good.
Okay.
So my wife and I were just on this trip, right? And one of the cool Sky Guide is basically like real stellar cartography for you today. So what you do is you're out at night and you just pick up your phone and hold it to the sky, and it shows you what all the stars are. And as you move your phone around, it's showing you all the different constellations of whatever you're looking at. And then it's like you go below the horizon. Like it doesn't care that the Earth is in the way. It's saying like, that's what's there. Like Orion is actually right under your feet right now, you know, or
That's
whatever.
awesome.
And you just, as you move it around, it's like cooler than stellar cartography. And it's just amazing. Like when you think about what technology can actually do and be, like that's an app that I just think about, you know, and it's so good, and it's so well done, and it just works really beautifully. Go check it out.
I will.
Go outside with your kids, you know, and play around with that. It's amazing.
That's cool.
You know, this is my piece of advice to new parents, which is, you know, there's all this stuff that like you're ready for and you're expecting, like, you know, about that's in all the books. I will tell them, you know, the thing about being a parent that just blows me away is how like 80% of the discussions I have with my spouse are about the logistics of children.
Yes. Oh God, yes.
How will we get them to school? And then who's going to pick up the kid and take them to the other thing? And then we have this other appointment on the other day that you have to go. And then I'll do the dropping off and you do the picking up. But then there's the carpool on Tuesday. And it's like, literally it's logistical discussions about moving people around is like half of parenting. Parenting.
Yeah. Or feeding. It's between moving them around and making sure they're fed in all that moving around so that nobody gets super cranky before you can get back home from wherever you were. So, yeah.
Oh, my God. It's so insane. So insane, you know, but no one's prepared for any of that. And just, you know, send me a DM or an email or something and we'll be good to go. All right?
Yeah. This was so fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's important to me that my guests always have a good time, you know, doing the show. That's sort of one of the things in the instances where I pursue a guest, rather than them volunteering to be on. One of the things I always tell them is, you know, people usually have a good time on the show. It's never a bad experience. You know, we don't, you know, barring technical issues, which sometimes happens, right? Sometimes that can be an issue for folks, but, you know, we always want to have a good time, you know, recording this and make it a centered, focused conversation around the guest and their experience of Star Trek. And I always weigh in with my wacky things, which people can, you know, beat me up on, which they do.
I love Twitter all your wacky observations. Like, seriously, that's how I knew we were going to be able to do this and have fun, because having read enough of your observations, we gel. It's good. The space meeting? No, like whenever you are tweeting about Enterprise and you're like, it's a space meeting. It's a space conference. I laugh every damn time. Like, it's just funny.
Well, there was one time I was watching one of these, because I'm in season 3 of Enterprise, and they're having this Voyager, the Xindi are having a meeting, and I'm like, this could have been an email. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I was like the Aquatics, that's what I would have been like. I was like, this could have been an email. Mm-hmm. Like, why are you, just put all this in, send me your PowerPoint deck and I'll just review it and tell you what I think we should do. Otherwise it'd be no show. But I was like,
but I have always thought, like, you know what? If we're looking for the Xindi and we find all of their like really important people in this council room together, that doesn't seem like the best thing. Like, do they have a designated survivor somewhere? And what species is it? Because
yeah, there's like an arboreal and an aquatic, like locked in a shuttlecraft somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I tell you what, though, it's what I find really evocative is how those the reptilian Xindi remind me so much of that guy from Galaxy Quest, or maybe vice versa.
Yeah.
Is how much they look alike. Yep. It really just kills me. Which, by the way, one of my favorite Star Trek films, Galaxy Quest. I always say that.